An ambush is the art of turning patience into power and invisibility into devastation. It is a war tactic rooted in the primal instinct to strike when least expected, to turn the natural vulnerability of surprise into a weapon more lethal than any sword or bullet. At its core, an ambush is the deliberate act of hiding in wait, often in silence, often in shadows, until the enemy wanders into the perfect position, unaware, exposed, and utterly doomed. Ambush. The emotional force of an ambush is overwhelming. It breaks not only the body, but the spirit. One moment, everything seems under control. The next, chaos erupts from nowhere. Bullets fly, blades flash, and panic takes hold. The mind reels because it has no time to process, no plan to follow, and no escape to execute. This psychological impact is precisely what makes the ambush so powerful. It annihilates clarity, strips away confidence, and leaves only instinct and fear to take the reins. Warriors who master the ambush understand human nature at its core. They know people are creatures of habit and routine, and they exploit this predictability. They don't just wait, they study. They learn terrain, rhythm, and movement until they can predict their enemy's steps like a dance. Then they become ghosts, silent observers turned sudden executioners. An ambush is not just a strategy of violence. It is a psychological assault designed to make the enemy feel small, helpless, and hunted. The terror of the unseen killer lingers long after the bullets stop, because the fear of where will they strike next never truly leaves the mind. Flanking is the silent art of betrayal in battle, the calculated move that slips past the front lines to strike where defenses are weakest. It's not just an attack, it's an intrusion, a violation of safety, a reminder that no shield is absolute. The essence of flanking lies in evasion and positioning, moving around the enemy's sides or rear while they're fixated on the front, turning their strength into blindness and their confidence into collapse. There's a cruel beauty in flanking. The enemy thinks they are prepared. They believe they are facing the threat head-on. They draw their lines, fortify their front, and steel their nerves for impact. But the flank is not where they're looking. It's the space they assumed was safe. When soldiers appear there, suddenly, mercilessly, it ignites more than confusion. It burns panic into the mind. Every direction becomes danger. Every second becomes too late. Flanking is effective because it mirrors the unexpected turns in life that leave us paralyzed when what we trusted, what we prepared for, becomes irrelevant. It's a collapse, not just of formation, but of faith in one's own security. The psychological devastation is massive. It dismantles control. It poisons leadership with indecision. It triggers chaos like a spark in dry brush. And the tactician who uses flanking is a predator in thought. They study the blind spots of human focus and the arrogance of static defense. They never confront power directly. They slide past it, wrap around it, and destroy it from behind. Not loudly, not honorably, but devastatingly. Pinsir Movement. The Pinsir Movement is the embodiment of inevitability in war, a slow, tightening noose that chokes hope from its victim before the first blade draws blood. It is the deliberate act of attacking both flanks simultaneously, driving into the sides of an enemy force and folding inward until there is no room left to run, no direction left to turn, no plan left to execute. It is not just a strategy, it is a feeling. The feeling of being hunted, of being surrounded, of realizing far too late that the trap was always closing. This tactic plays on one of the deepest human fears, entrapment. To be caught in the middle with pressure on all sides and no escape is a primal nightmare. The Pinsir Movement turns this fear into a weapon, feeding on the panic that erupts when soldiers feel their lines buckle and see enemies materialize from the edges of their vision. It spreads confusion like wildfire. Orders falter, coordination dies, morale shatters beneath the weight of isolation. Those who wield the Pinsir are not just warriors, They are strategists of psychological ruin. They do not seek quick victory. They orchestrate collapse. Their attack is not a single blow, but a symphony of dread, pressure, and disorientation. Like jaws clamping shut, the arms of the pincer squeeze until resistance is meaningless. What makes this tactic so emotionally punishing is the illusion of safety before the strike. The enemy believes they are fighting forward. They don't see that the battle was never meant to be fair. It was meant to be claustrophobic, humiliating, and absolute. Feigned Retreat. The feigned retreat is seduction disguised as surrender, a cunning illusion that preys on the enemy's thirst for triumph and turns their momentum into a trap. It is the act of pretending to flee, of showing weakness so convincingly that the opponent drops their guard, breaks formation, and lunges forward with reckless hunger. But what they're chasing isn't a victory. It's a grave that's already been dug. At the heart of this tactic lies one of the oldest and darkest truths of human nature. We are drawn to weakness we think we can dominate. The feigned retreat manipulates this instinct masterfully. It whispers the lie of collapse into the enemy's ear, lures them from their stronghold, and tempts them into abandoning discipline for desire. And just when they believe they have turned the tide, just when their confidence swells and they taste the sweetness of an easy kill, the trap snaps shut. The retreating force reverses, re-engages, and cuts down an enemy too scattered, too exposed, and too drunk on delusion to defend themselves. It's a tactic that turns patience into a weapon and acting into a killer's craft. The soldiers must sell the illusion, show fear in their eyes, drop their weapons, stagger with exhaustion. But underneath, they are coiled, calculating, waiting for the signal to strike, that moment when their enemy steps too far into the open, too far into comfort, too far from caution. The emotional cruelty of the feigned retreat is in its betrayal of hope. It offers the illusion of dominance, only to snatch it away in the most punishing way possible, by letting the enemy defeat themselves. Guerrilla Warfare. Guerrilla warfare is rebellion in its rawest form, a war cry from the shadows, a refusal to kneel even when outnumbered, outgunned, and overlooked. It is not fought on even ground. It is not bound by rules. It is born from desperation and defiance, crafted by those who have nothing left to lose except the chains that bind them. Guerrilla warfare is the weapon of the small against the mighty, the unseen against the proud, the forgotten against the empire. This tactic thrives on mobility, unpredictability, and the psychological erosion of the enemy's will. Guerrillas do not wear polished uniforms or march in perfect lines. They strike when least expected, vanishing into mountains, forests, and cities before retaliation can find them. They are everywhere and nowhere. Their battlefield is not the front line. It is every road, every village, every moment of rest the enemy dares to take. What makes guerrilla warfare so emotionally haunting is its relentlessness. It never gives the enemy peace. It strips them of safety, sanity, and trust. They begin to fear every sound, every shadow, every local face. Exhaustion sets in. Morale crumbles. The war feels endless because it is not being fought in one place. It is being fought in the mind. To fight guerrillas is to fight ghosts, but to be one is to become the embodiment of resistance. Each ambush, each sabotage, each whispered rumor of movement is a declaration. We are still here. You will never rest. Guerrilla warfare is more than a tactic. It is survival weaponized into strategy and vengeance sculpted into fire. Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is lightning given purpose, speed transformed into devastation. It is not just an attack, but a storm that arrives too fast, too violently, and too relentlessly for the enemy to comprehend, let alone respond. Born from the desire to end wars before they can even begin to settle, Blitzkrieg is the tactic of overwhelming force applied with terrifying precision. It breaks the will before it breaks the line. This method unleashes tanks, infantry, and air power in a synchronized rush, striking deep into enemy territory with no pause, no mercy, no hesitation. The goal isn't just to win, it's to shatter, to confuse, to destroy structure, sever communication, and unravel command before the enemy even knows where to send their first order. The brilliance of Blitzkrieg is not simply in power, but in the speed of pressure. By the time the enemy rallies, they are already defeated. But beneath the mechanics lies something more psychological, something brutal. Blitzkrieg weaponizes fear. The rapid advance generates a sense of inevitability in those under attack. They don't feel like they're fighting, they feel like they're drowning. Each second they hesitate, another position falls. Each hour they wait, another unit is gone. It leaves leaders frozen, soldiers disoriented, and defenders lost in the chaos of collapsing fronts. Blitzkrieg is what it feels like to be hunted by the future. It creates a battlefield where there is no time to think, no room to regroup, and no direction that leads to safety. It is the thunderclap that silences resistance before it even speaks. Scorched Earth. Scorched Earth is not a tactic of victory. It is a tactic of vengeance. It is the decision to turn your own land, your own cities, your own future into ashes, simply to deny it to the enemy. It is the fury of a retreating army that would rather burn everything behind them than let their enemies taste a moment of triumph. This strategy is not about winning. It's about making sure no one else wins either. At its core, Scorched Earth is a declaration of emotional devastation. It screams, "If I cannot have it, neither can you." Crops are torched, homes are flattened, roads are torn apart, water is poisoned. Every comfort, every resource, every shred of convenience is reduced to ruin. The enemy advances not into a conquered land, but into a wasteland that offers no shelter, no food, no peace, only the haunting echo of what used to be. This tactic is a psychological hammer. It crushes morale. Soldiers who believe they were pushing toward glory are instead met with smoke-choked skies and starving bellies. Their victory becomes meaningless, hollow, and heavy. The Scorched Earth denies them the pleasure of spoils, the pride of progress, and the illusion of control. What makes this tactic so harrowing is that it destroys not just the present, but the future. It leaves behind a trail of pain for both sides. Civilians suffer, generations rebuild, but in that moment, when the flames rise and the fields turn black, it is pure, raw defiance. It is the war cry of a people who would rather lose everything than submit. Encirclement is the slow, merciless art of suffocation in war, a strategy not built on speed, but on inevitability. It is the deliberate act of surrounding the enemy entirely, cutting off every path, every supply, every breath of hope, until what remains is not a fighting force, but a trapped animal, tired, starving, afraid. It is a tactic that doesn't just defeat the body, it starves the soul. The psychological terror of encirclement is unmatched. It's not the battle itself that crushes the enemy, it's the silence, the waiting, the growing realization that no one is coming. When a force is surrounded, time becomes the true killer. Each hour drains morale. Each day chips away at discipline. Paranoia sets in. Desperation blooms. Food dwindles. Water runs dry. And the weight of isolation becomes unbearable. There are no reinforcements, no escape. Only the encroaching circle, tighter with every breath. What makes encirclement so devastating is that it transforms control into a prison. An army that once stood proud becomes trapped within the very land it occupied. It is humiliation without words, submission without surrender. The leaders inside are forced to make impossible decisions, fight blindly, die slowly, or beg for terms. Those who execute encirclement are not chasing glory. They are orchestrating despair. They don't need to charge the front lines. They don't need to shout or provoke. They simply surround, seal, and wait. Because eventually, even the strongest soldier breaks when they feel the world closing in around them, when the fight turns inward and every shadow whispers, there is no way out. Siege. A siege is not a battle. It is a slow, merciless suffocation of spirit. It is the art of starving hope itself. To lay siege is to surround, to isolate, to squeeze the life from within without ever crossing the walls. It is war stripped of glory, dragged into days and weeks of attrition, where the enemy doesn't fall from wounds, but from hunger, thirst, disease, and despair. It is the kind of tactic that haunts minds long before it spills blood. A siege doesn't roar, it whispers. It whispers doubts through sleepless nights. It whispers hunger into empty stomachs. It whispers betrayal among the desperate. The defenders begin proud, standing tall behind their walls, but the siege waits. It watches them ration their food, bury their dead, and count the days. It forces them to turn inward, against each other, against their own resolve. There is no safety in a siege, no mercy. It erodes from the inside, turning cities into prisons and defenders into prisoners of their own walls. Children cry not from wounds, but from starvation. Leaders break not from battle, but from the unbearable weight of decision, surrender and survive, or resist and perish. For the attackers, it is a psychological knife slowly twisted. They deny the enemy every comfort, every resource, every ounce of control. They build fear with silence. They watch from a distance as panic festers and morale disintegrates. The siege doesn't strike with force. It rots from within, turning time into a weapon more devastating than any blade, and time always wins. Shock and awe. Shock and awe is not simply a tactic. It is a declaration of dominance, so absolute that it crushes resistance before it can breathe. It is the orchestration of overwhelming force, scale, and spectacle, designed to paralyze the enemy's will, confuse their senses, and make defiance feel not just futile, but suicidal. It doesn't whisper fear, it screams it. It doesn't ask for surrender. It demands it by making the alternative look like annihilation. This tactic hits all at once. Precision strikes, deafening explosions, walls of fire, skies filled with roaring aircraft. Every element is calculated to overload the senses. It's a psychological blitz, aimed not just at destroying infrastructure, but at collapsing the mind of the opponent. Soldiers on the receiving end don't feel like they're at war. They feel like they're facing something godlike, an unstoppable force that doesn't fight them, but erases them. Shock and awe works because it overwhelms two things humans rely on most in crisis: understanding and control. When bombs fall faster than thoughts, when darkness is lit up like day, and when entire command structures are ripped apart in seconds, there is no time to plan, no room for courage, no space to think. There is only reaction, and the reaction it creates is terror. The brilliance of shock and awe lies in its ruthlessness. It's not about honor, it's about domination. It's about showing the enemy that resistance is not only hopeless, but meaningless, that they are not fighting equals, they are facing something bigger, louder, faster, and utterly unforgiving. And once they believe that, you've already won. Hit and run. Hit and run is the war tactic of ghosts, here, then gone, silent, then explosive. It is not built on brute strength or overwhelming numbers, but on speed, timing, and the cold precision of knowing exactly when to strike and when to vanish. The goal is never to hold ground. The goal is to make the enemy bleed, then disappear before they can strike back. It's not a fight, it's a haunting. This tactic thrives on psychological erosion. Imagine standing in the dark, hearing footsteps, and bracing for an attack that never fully comes, only to be slashed from the shadows moments later, again and again. It's the warfare of erosion, not confrontation. The enemy is never given peace, never given a proper battle, never allowed to retaliate. They swing at air, they chase ghosts, and over time, they stop sleeping. Stop trusting. Stop feeling safe at all. Hit and run is most powerful against forces that rely on structure and routine. The enemy might have 1,000 men, tanks, or technology, but it means nothing if they're swinging blindly. This tactic weaponizes unpredictability. It forces exhaustion. It infects every moment of calm with the fear of sudden violence. It is not glamorous. It is not noble. It is relentless, infuriating, and demoralizing. Warriors who master hit and run don't seek applause. They seek control over the enemy's mind, to make them paranoid, to make them afraid of shadows, to make them question if the next patrol, the next step, the next breath will be the one that bleeds. Trench warfare is the brutal embodiment of endurance over elegance, a war tactic not born from brilliance, but from desperation. It is a world carved into the earth where men vanish into mud, blood, and waiting, a tactic of static lines and shattered nerves where progress is measured in inches and survival feels more like a sentence than a triumph. In the trenches, time stretches endlessly and death doesn't always scream. It sometimes just waits. The emotional toll of trench warfare is suffocating. Soldiers live like ghosts in narrow ditches, soaked by rain, surrounded by rot, and haunted by the thunder of artillery that never seems to stop. The enemy isn't always seen. Often, it's just felt, in the whistle of a distant shell, in the silence before an attack, in the unbearable tension that lingers like a shadow too thick to shake. Sleep is shallow, food is scarce, the stench of decay is constant. But worse than all of this is the feeling of being stuck, of knowing that the next order might be to charge into a storm of bullets for a patch of land that no one will remember. This tactic doesn't just erode the body, it crushes hope, the monotony, the fear, the filth. It breaks something deep inside. It teaches men that survival isn't about strength, it's about endurance. Those who wage trench warfare aren't hunting victory. They are digging in for survival, counting hours, watching friends vanish, and praying the next sunrise isn't their last. It's not a strategy. It's a purgatory carved into the ground. Attrition warfare. Attrition warfare is brutality without elegance, the relentless grind of flesh against steel, hope against inevitability. It is not about brilliance or maneuver. It is about endurance, about who breaks first. It's the tactic of wearing down an enemy by bleeding them, starving them, exhausting them, slowly, methodically, mercilessly, until their strength is gone and their will to fight collapses under the weight of cumulative loss. It is the most honest and the most horrifying face of war, nothing but raw, unforgiving sacrifice. This form of warfare feeds on numbers and nerves. It doesn't seek a swift victory. It demands a prolonged one. It stretches every battle, every inch of land, into a graveyard. It counts success not by territory gained, but by bodies buried. Soldiers become statistics, civilians become collateral, and every advance is bought with blood, real blood, pooled, rotting, soaking into scorched earth. It is war reduced to a test of which side can suffer more without shattering. Emotionally, attrition is the cruelest because it dangles no glory. There's no heroic moment, no cinematic charge, just endless marching, endless dying, and the numb repetition of violence. Morale erodes not from defeat, but from exhaustion, from watching comrades fall for nothing more than a few yards of dirt, from realizing you are part of a machine designed not to win quickly, but to outlast. The strategist of attrition is not a genius. He is a butcher with a calendar. He measures progress in corpses and patience, and when the dust settles, there's no triumph, only the side with fewer scars still standing amid the ruin. Naval Blockade. A naval blockade is war without the roar of cannons, a quiet, suffocating stranglehold that kills a nation from the outside in. It is the tactic of denial, of choking life, not by storming cities or breaking walls, but by cutting off everything a people need to survive: Food, fuel, medicine, weapons, none are spared. A naval blockade turns the sea into an invisible wall, and behind it, hope begins to rot. This method of warfare doesn't aim for swift victory. It aims for exhaustion. It starves economies, shatters supply lines, and turns civilians into casualties through silence and scarcity. Day by day, ships are halted, trade dies, ports stand useless. The pressure isn't sudden, it's relentless, like watching a body slowly lose oxygen, powerless to stop it. What makes a blockade so emotionally savage is its attack on the unseen. There is no front line to fight, no clear enemy to confront. The people suffer in uncertainty, wondering how long their strength will last, how long until their shelves go empty, until the black markets rise, until desperation tears their society apart. It breaks morale without firing a shot, because it doesn't just target soldiers, it targets survival. The architects of a naval blockade wield power with icy patience. They don't rush, they tighten. They watch famine spread, disease follow, and resistance weaken under the weight of helplessness. And when the final blow comes, if it ever needs to, it lands on a nation already bled dry, already hollowed from the inside, not by fire, not by steel, but by silence. Air superiority. Air superiority is the domination of the skies, a godlike grip on the battlefield that crushes enemies not just with firepower, but with the knowledge that escape is impossible and shelter is an illusion. It is the ability to own the heavens, to see all, strike all, and silence resistance before it even dares to rise. Once air superiority is established, the ground war changes. Soldiers fight not just their visible foes, but the constant fear of death falling from above. This tactic doesn't whisper, it roars. Jets scream overhead, missiles rain down without warning, drones stalk from unseen heights. The enemy's movements become frantic, paranoid, and hesitant. Every convoy is a target, every radio signal a beacon, every open space a grave. With the skies under control, timing, freedom, and morale all shift violently in favor of the one who rules above. Air superiority is more than just tactical advantage. It is psychological warfare in its purest form. It instills helplessness. You cannot outrun a supersonic jet. You cannot hide from a satellite's gaze. You cannot return fire to a bomber that's miles beyond your reach. This imbalance breeds despair. The enemy's spirit cracks long before their bodies fall, because they are no longer fighting on even terms. They are surviving under a storm that never clears. It is ruthless, decisive, and terrifyingly efficient. When you own the air, you own the fear. And when fear becomes part of the terrain, the war is half won before the first foot even hits the ground. Divide and conquer is the art of turning unity into weakness. It is not fought with firepower. It is fought with whispers, manipulation, and the deliberate slicing of trust. This tactic is built on a single, devastating truth. People are strongest together. So the one who divides them, who plants doubt, stirs jealousy, fuels rivalry, doesn't need to destroy the enemy. They make the enemy destroy themselves. The brilliance of divide and conquer is how quietly it begins. A rumor here, a slight there, a subtle shift in loyalty, and slowly alliances begin to fray. Leaders mistrust their own soldiers, soldiers question their commanders, communities fragment, brothers turn cold, friends turn wary. No bullets are fired, but the damage is catastrophic. Division makes people easier to control. Confused people are easier to lead. Isolated people are easier to defeat. It is a psychological ambush, and once the cracks begin to spread, they often grow into chasms that cannot be closed. The target finds themselves trapped in arguments they never expected, surrounded by enemies that once were allies. The battlefield shifts from the front lines to the inside of their own camp. Chaos replaces coordination. Suspicion silences strategy. Paranoia suffocates morale. Those who master divide and conquer are puppeteers of conflict. They exploit emotions, pride, fear, envy, and turn them into tools sharper than swords. They understand that humans, when divided, are more vulnerable than any exposed flank. It is a tactic that doesn't just break the enemy, it convinces them to break themselves. And by the time they realize it, it's already too late. Surprise attack. A surprise attack is thunder out of silence, terror wrapped in speed, fury born from invisibility. It is the violent shattering of expectation, the instant when calm becomes chaos, and time itself seems to fracture. This tactic is built on one core principle: shock, not just physical, but psychological. It is the moment the enemy blinks, breathes, or dares to feel safe, and in that fragile opening, devastation strikes without warning, without mercy, and without pause. The power of a surprise attack lies in its ability to paralyze the mind before the body can react. Soldiers freeze, commands falter, defenses unravel. What once felt fortified becomes exposed. What once seemed prepared becomes helpless. It's not just about catching someone off guard. It's about tearing the ground out from under them, emotionally, mentally, and strategically. The violence is sudden, yes, but the fear it plants lingers like poison. This tactic is often the first blow in wars that reshape history. It's a spark that turns stability into inferno. Pearl Harbor, Blitzkrieg, midnight raids, these weren't just attacks, they were psychic ruptures, events that proved one brutal truth: safety is an illusion, and peace can die in seconds. What makes the surprise attack so emotionally explosive is the betrayal of time. The enemy thinks they have it. They think they'll see it coming, but they don't. And when the attack comes, exploding through doors, skies, trees, silence, it doesn't just kill bodies. It kills confidence permanently, because once you've been attacked without warning, you never truly feel safe again. You live waiting for the next blow. Sabotage. Sabotage is the dagger in the dark, the unseen hand that rots strength from within before the battle even begins. It is not an open confrontation, but a betrayal of function, a quiet and deliberate act of destruction that turns machines into coffins, plans into chaos, and trust into suspicion. Sabotage does not roar, it whispers, and its whisper can be deadlier than a bomb. What makes sabotage so terrifying is its intimacy. It's not the enemy at the gates, it's the traitor inside the walls. A wrench thrown into the gears of a tank, a cut wire in a communication line, a bolt loosened just enough to fail under pressure. It strikes where the enemy feels safest, behind the lines, in the logistics, in the heartbeat of the war machine. And when it hits, it feels like betrayal, like the very tools you trusted have turned against you. The emotional devastation of sabotage is profound. It sows doubt in every corner. Can this equipment be trusted? Was it an accident or intent? Who among us is working for them? It tears apart not just systems, but unity. Soldiers hesitate. Commanders question. Fear spreads like infection. Because sabotage doesn't just break things, it breaks faith. Saboteurs are ghosts in a battlefield of routine. They don't need to outgun their enemies, they just need to outthink them. Their strength lies in their silence, their patience, and their ability to make one small flaw unravel an entire mission. In war, they are the invisible authors of failure, writing defeat into the machinery, one subtle cut at a time. And when the damage surfaces, it's already too late. Psychological warfare. Psychological warfare is the battle you fight in the mind long before a bullet is fired. It's not about weapons. It's about whispers, illusions, and the quiet corrosion of certainty. It is the art of turning doubt into a disease, fear into a fog, and trust into a trap. While armies clash on the surface, psychological warfare digs beneath, uprooting courage and replacing it with dread that spreads like poison through the soul. This tactic does not seek to destroy the body. It aims to shatter the will. It distorts reality, until nothing feels stable. Propaganda becomes a sword, lies become bullets, rumors slip behind enemy lines and bloom into chaos. The goal isn't just to confuse, it's to isolate, to make every soldier question their leaders, their allies, even themselves. A demoralized army doesn't need to be killed, it just needs to believe it has already lost. Psychological warfare feeds off fear, amplifies it, weaponizes it. Think of an enemy waking each day to messages predicting their death. Think of a commander hearing phantom radio chatter of betrayal. Think of a population surrounded not by tanks, but by voices whispering surrender. The battlefield becomes irrelevant when the enemy is too broken to fight. It is cruel, it is invisible, and it is devastating. No wall can block it, no armor can stop it. When executed masterfully, psychological warfare collapses an army from the inside out, leaving only empty uniforms and haunted eyes. Because when the war is in your head, peace is the first casualty. Night attack, and night attack is war in its most primal, most terrifying form, when the battlefield is cloaked in darkness and the senses become unreliable. It is the unleashing of chaos when vision falters, commands blur, and fear multiplies. The tactic of striking under the cover of night is not just about concealment, it is about amplifying terror, disorienting the mind, and turning every shadow into a threat. In the dark, the enemy can't see you coming, but worse, they can't tell where you are once you strike. The emotional power of a night attack is suffocating. Soldiers wake to screams, explosions, and the sudden jarring realization that the world around them has become a trap. Confusion reigns, communication breaks down, allies become indistinguishable from enemies. Even the most disciplined warriors feel the grip of panic when visibility vanishes and the rules of war dissolve into shadows. This tactic is built on surprise, but thrives on fear. Humans are wired to fear what they can't see. Darkness makes the mind spiral, imagining threats larger than reality. A single spark becomes a firestorm. A footstep sounds like a stampede. The night becomes an accomplice to the attacker, magnifying each strike, each scream, each death. The force that executes a night attack becomes almost supernatural, moving like phantoms, hitting and vanishing before the enemy can even aim. They don't just destroy, they haunt. The memory of a night assault lingers long after the bodies are buried, because fear doesn't die with the dawn. It festers, and it waits. Infiltration. Infiltration is war behind a mask. It is the cold, deliberate invasion of trust, territory, and thought without ever declaring a fight. It's not the roar of battle, it's the soundless slip of a shadow through cracks in the wall. This tactic is about entry without alarm, movement without trace, and destruction from the inside out. It is the art of becoming invisible long enough to become lethal. The power of infiltration lies in its intimacy. Unlike a charge or a bombing run, infiltration brings the war into the heart of the enemy, into their camps, their ranks, their command. It turns safe spaces into battlegrounds and allies into threats. Soldiers begin to wonder who's real, who's watching, who's already broken their lines. The fear becomes internal. Every face is suspect. Every silence is a warning. Those who master infiltration are not just warriors. They are predators with patience. They study routines, mimic behaviors, learn passwords, wear enemy uniforms, and blend in like smoke in the wind. They don't rush. They move with intention. One step too fast, and the illusion shatters. One step too slow, and the opportunity dies. But when it works, when the enemy realizes too late that the traitor was already inside, it triggers collapse, not just of structure, but of spirit. Emotionally, infiltration is betrayal made strategy. It wounds deeper than a bullet because it doesn't just kill, it corrupts. It leaves the enemy questioning everything, doubting everyone. It doesn't just destroy from within, it makes the victim help in their own undoing. That is the beauty and brutality of infiltration. You never see it coming. You only feel it when it's already far too late. Raiding is warfare stripped to its rawest nerve, sudden, brutal, and unapologetically violent. It is not about territory or conquest. It's about disruption. It's about sending a message carved into scorched earth and shattered structures. A raid is the embodiment of intrusion, a flash of steel in the night, a scream where there should be silence. It hits hard, fast, and without warning, and then disappears before retaliation can draw its breath. There is something deeply psychological about a raid. It turns every safe place into a question mark. No garrison feels secure, no outpost beyond reach. Those on the receiving end don't just suffer loss, they suffer fear. The kind of fear that stalks sleep, that hears every rustle as footsteps, every shadow as the return of the enemy. Raiding doesn't aim to destroy armies. It aims to destroy rhythm, routine, and rest. A well-executed raid collapses the enemy's sense of control. It strikes supply depots, command centers, or vulnerable patrols, bleeding them where they least expect it and hurting them where it counts most. And then, like phantoms, the raiders vanish. The damage is real, the fear is lasting, and the enemy is left swinging at smoke. But it is also a tactic born of necessity, used by the outnumbered, the cornered, the defiant. Raiders don't need superiority, they need speed, cunning, and cruelty. They play by different rules, striking not for glory, but to remind their enemies, nowhere is safe. No wall is high enough, no night is quiet enough, and no war is ever truly theirs alone. Decapitation Strike. A decapitation strike is the blade aimed not at the body, but at the brain, the calculated assassination of leadership, the sudden removal of command that sends an entire force spiraling into disarray. It is not about numbers, it is about precision. It is about taking one shot so well placed, so devastating, that it paralyzes everything beneath it. Like a guillotine falling in silence, it severs the head from the body and leaves only confusion in its place. This tactic is brutal, not because of the damage it causes, but because of the void it creates. When a general is taken out in the opening moments, when a political leader vanishes before their message is spoken, when the voice that once gave orders goes silent, those beneath are left groping in the dark. Fear sets in, doubt multiplies, soldiers hesitate, commanders freeze. No one knows who's in charge. No one knows what comes next. A decapitation strike doesn't just kill, it disorients. It robs the enemy of cohesion, momentum, and morale in one fell swoop. And the terror doesn't end with the first death. It spreads like wildfire. Every remaining leader becomes a target. Every word spoken from the top is shadowed by the fear of being silenced next. Authority crumbles. Structure collapses. The enemy becomes a beast with 1,000 limbs and no mind to guide them. There is something deeply haunting about watching strength unravel from the top down. A decapitation strike makes power look fragile. It reminds everyone that no matter how vast an army may be, all it takes is one perfect strike to bring it to its knees. Cyber warfare. Cyber warfare is the invisible battlefield of the modern world, a war fought without borders, without uniforms, and often without a single gunshot. It is not waged with muscle, but with code, not with tanks, but with algorithms. In cyber warfare, the enemy doesn't break down your doors. They log into your systems, hide in your networks, and tear your world apart from the inside out. It's silent, it's sudden, and it's devastating. What makes cyber warfare so emotionally jarring is its subtlety. You don't hear the explosion, you don't see the attacker. Instead, the lights flicker, the banks fail, the hospitals shut down, the satellites go dark, and no one knows who did it. Was it a nation, a rogue hacker, your own government? That uncertainty, combined with the sheer helplessness it creates, is psychological warfare at its peak. This tactic thrives on fear and vulnerability. In a world that runs on digital infrastructure, even a whisper of a breach can cause mass panic. Stock markets crash, power grids collapse. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, setting societies against themselves without a single shot fired. Cyber warriors don't just attack systems, they attack trust. Trust in information, trust in security, trust in control. The battlefield is everywhere. Your phone, your car, your water supply. The soldier might be a teenager in a basement or a state-sponsored operative halfway across the globe, and you won't know until it's too late. Cyber warfare isn't coming. It's already here, and its most terrifying weapon is the fact that you often don't even realize you're under attack until everything around you begins to fail. Counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency is not just war. It's a battle for belief, a brutal chess game where bullets are only half the weapon and hearts are the ultimate prize. It is the response to rebellion, the calculated crushing of unrest, the attempt to extinguish a flame that spreads in whispers and hides in crowds. Unlike traditional warfare, counterinsurgency doesn't fight armies. It fights ideas, shadows, and the rage that festers in silence. This tactic is suffocating because it operates in a space where everyone is a suspect and no place is truly safe. The enemy doesn't wear a uniform. They wear the face of the people. They move through marketplaces, villages, families. So, the counterinsurgent must fight with intelligence, not just firepower. They must dig into local trust networks, infiltrate rumor mills, and break the cycle of support that fuels the uprising. But the emotional toll is staggering because in this war, mistakes are inevitable and devastating. A raid gone wrong can turn neutral civilians into enemies overnight. A single misfire can birth 100 new rebels. Every action echoes through communities, feeding either peace or fury. This is why counterinsurgency is often a war of restraint, of controlling rage while surrounded by it, of offering aid with one hand while holding a rifle in the other. The soldiers of counterinsurgency don't just fight to kill, they fight to convince, to rebuild, to break the insurgents' influence by replacing it. But it's a slow, agonizing process, one where victories are fragile, betrayals are frequent, and every smile could be the mask of a killer. Because the real enemy here is not just a rebel, it's the idea that rebellion still feels worth it. Defense in depth is the art of breaking the attacker before they reach the heart. It is not a wall, it is a labyrinth, a carefully layered network of resistance designed to exhaust, confuse, and punish the enemy step by step. Each layer isn't meant to stop them completely, it's meant to bleed them slowly, to make every inch of progress feel like a mile soaked in sweat, blood, and uncertainty. This tactic plays on the psychology of erosion. The attacker expects a single line, a challenge they can overcome with brute force, but instead, they find an endless gauntlet. After breaching the first barrier, there is no celebration, only another, and another. The deeper they go, the more their confidence rots. They begin to question the cost, the strategy, the mission itself. Morale frays, chaos spreads, and leadership loses its grip. Each defensive line is a trap, a test of patience, a psychological blow. Minefields drain speed, bunkers force detours, hidden units strike, then disappear. Every pause is an ambush. Every path leads into another layer of resistance. The terrain itself becomes an enemy, shaped not just to stop bodies, but to bend minds. Defense in depth is not just protection, it is provocation. It dares the enemy to come further, to believe they're close to victory, only to sink them deeper into frustration and fatigue. By the time they reach the final stronghold, they are no longer an army. They are a collection of broken men wondering if the heart of the fortress was ever worth the cost at all. Forward defense. Forward defense is the defiant act of meeting destruction at the doorstep and refusing to let it cross the threshold. It is not a tactic for the timid. It is for those who would rather bleed on foreign ground than watch their homeland burn. This strategy involves confronting the enemy far from your vital centers, holding them back at distant frontiers, sacrificing distance for time and lives for leverage. It is a shield extended, a wall built from willpower and preemptive grit. At its core, forward defense is fueled by a primal instinct. Protect what you love by putting your body between it and the fire. It requires relentless vigilance, constant readiness, and a willingness to endure prolonged pressure. You are not defending from comfort. You are defending in hostile terrain, in places where supply lines stretch thin, where allies may be scarce, and where the enemy's reach is ever present. Emotionally, forward defense is a psychological gamble. It forces the attacker into unfamiliar territory, but at great cost. Soldiers posted to the edge know they're expendable. They know that if the enemy breaks through, they may be cut off, left behind, forgotten. And yet they hold, not because it's easy, but because failure means everything behind them falls. The fear behind forward defense is deep. It's the fear that the war will reach your doorstep. It's the drive to make sure it never does. And for those holding the front line, it becomes more than strategy. It becomes identity. They are the line. They are the first to bleed, the first to die, and the last thing standing between safety and devastation. Mobile defense is the art of dancing with destruction. Never fixed, never predictable, always one step ahead of annihilation. It is not about holding ground. It is about buying time, draining momentum, and luring the enemy into exhaustion. Where others dig in and resist, mobile defense flows like water, constantly shifting, refusing to be cornered. It is a war tactic rooted in control through chaos, in choosing movement over martyrdom. Emotionally, it is the war cry of the outnumbered, the overwhelmed, the hunted who refuse to die standing still. The essence of mobile defense lies in adaptability. You don't fight to win every battle. You fight to deny the enemy theirs. You retreat not out of weakness, but to reset the battlefield, to pull your opponent deeper into unfamiliar territory, to stretch their supply lines, to bait their confidence, and when they're far enough, when they think they've gained ground, you strike from the flanks, from the rear, from everywhere they thought was clear. The beauty of this tactic is in its defiance. You never give them the victory they came for. They want conquest. You give them a mirage. They want a target. You give them smoke. And while they're chasing what they think is your collapse, they bleed, slowly, consistently, and without pause. Mobile defense demands discipline. Every move must be precise, every withdrawal intentional. It's a constant tightrope walk between flexibility and fragmentation. But when executed with mastery, it does more than protect. It punishes overreach, breaks expectations, and turns the enemy's advance into their slow unraveling. Static defense is the act of making the ground sacred, of turning terrain into defiance, of saying, we will not move and you will not pass. It is war at its most stubborn, most grounded, most unyielding. It is the wall that refuses to fall, the fortress that becomes legend, the soldier who chooses to die standing rather than live fleeing. It is not flashy. It is not fast. It is endurance cast in concrete and blood. This tactic is built on preparation. Trenches carved like scars into the earth, barbed wire like thorns on a boundary, machine gun nests that spit steel into the advancing dark. It turns open ground into a killing field and dares the enemy to cross it. It dares them to try, because in static defense, time favors the defender. Every second the enemy charges is another second they bleed. But static defense is not without its agony. Emotionally, it is a suffocating grind. The defenders wait and wait, under shell fire, under skies that never go dark, under the knowledge that they are surrounded, targeted, and slowly being drowned in explosives. Every day becomes a gamble. Will the next barrage break the line? Will the wall hold? Yet in that suffering is a kind of twisted pride. To hold, to last, to outlive the storm. Static defense is about more than protection. It's about resilience. It is the refusal to bend, the declaration that this position, this city, this inch of soil is worth everything, even if it costs everything, because sometimes the only way to win is to stay, and not fall. Salami Tactics. Salami Tactics is conquest in slow motion, slicing away resistance one thin piece at a time until there's nothing left to fight with. It's not an open charge, it's a whisper of compromise, a creeping erosion that feels too small to resist until it's too late. This tactic is manipulation disguised as progress, erosion masquerading as diplomacy. It feeds on apathy, fatigue, and the human desire to avoid conflict, no matter the cost. It begins with small demands, harmless, even reasonable, a minor concession here, a procedural change there, a reshuffling of authority. Each act is insignificant on its own, easy to ignore, easy to justify. But with each slice, the opposition weakens, the foundation thins, and before anyone realizes what's been lost, the core is gone, and power has shifted entirely. What makes Salami Tactics so chilling is its invisibility. There is no declaration of war, no marching armies, no one moment to fight back. It doesn't break the door. It picks the lock, rearranges the room, and burns the blueprints before anyone notices. It's political warfare at its most venomous, used to dismantle coalitions, suppress dissent, or seize control under the illusion of order. Psychologically, it paralyzes. Each slice is too small to justify a strong response. Speaking out makes you seem dramatic. Acting out makes you seem unstable. So silence spreads, and in that silence, the next cut is made, and the next, until the resistance is fragmented, the will is broken, and the salami is gone, consumed piece by an enemy who never once had to draw a sword. Reconnaissance in force. Reconnaissance in force is the act of provoking the unknown with blood in your mouth and fire in your hands. It is not a silent scout sneaking through the dark. It is a deliberate, aggressive push into enemy territory, loud and violent, designed not to conquer but to expose. The goal is discovery through confrontation, to force the enemy to react, to reveal their positions, strength, and intentions, all while disguising curiosity beneath the mask of fury. This tactic is not for the faint of heart. It requires sending soldiers into danger, knowing they may not return. They are not there to win. They are there to bleed just enough to make the enemy show their teeth. Every explosion they provoke, every shot fired in return becomes data. Every counterattack is a confession, and every fallen soldier becomes a tragic sacrifice in the pursuit of knowledge that could turn the tide of war. Reconnaissance in force is emotionally savage, because it turns people into instruments. It trades clarity for chaos. It accepts loss as a necessary offering to unveil the truth. To lead such a mission is to look your men in the eyes and ask them to run head first into the unknown, knowing full well that the mission is not to win, but to learn. And yet, this tactic is often the edge between blindness and foresight. In the fog of war, hesitation kills. A commander who knows the enemy's heart before the battle begins holds the key to victory. And sometimes, the only way to find that truth is to draw it out with violence. Preemptive Strike. A preemptive strike is war's deadliest form of anticipation. A decision forged in fear, sharpened by suspicion, and unleashed with the cold certainty that waiting could mean ruin. It is the act of hitting first, not because you want to, but because you believe you have to. It is not self-defense. It is the belief that you won't survive unless you stop the threat before it begins. The emotional charge of a preemptive strike is electric and volatile. It is fueled by tension stretched to its breaking point, by intelligence reports, troop movements, rising rhetoric, and sleepless nights. It is the unbearable pressure of watching a storm build on the horizon and choosing to fire the first lightning bolt. And once that decision is made, once the missiles fly or the troops move in, there's no going back. Peace is shattered not by the enemy's hand, but by your own. The power of this tactic lies in surprise, in disrupting the enemy's plans before they can even be executed. It can dismantle leadership, destroy stockpiled weapons, obliterate strategy, and leave the opposition stunned, disoriented, scrambling for a response. But its psychological warfare runs even deeper. A preemptive strike sends a message: we see you, we know your intentions, and we will not wait to be attacked. Yet beneath its strategic brilliance lies a dangerous truth. It plays with morality, with perception, with global judgment. Because if you're wrong, if the threat wasn't real, then you didn't prevent a war. You started one, and that weight lingers forever. A preemptive strike is not just a tactic, it is a gamble with history. False flag operation. A false flag operation is deception turned into destruction, a calculated act of manipulation where the hand that strikes wears another's glove. It is the deliberate staging of an attack, act of terror, or provocation to appear as if it was committed by someone else, usually an enemy or outsider. The goal is not just physical damage, but psychological warfare on a societal scale, shifting blame, igniting rage, manufacturing justification for vengeance. It is lying through blood and making that lie feel righteous. This tactic is a symphony of illusion and timing. A convoy is bombed, a base is attacked, civilians are slaughtered, and the evidence is laid out with surgical precision. Flags, weapons, uniforms, forged documents, all pointing to the scapegoat. The real architects watch as outrage erupts. Politicians pound fists, citizens scream for justice, war drums start to beat. But behind it all stands a single, chilling truth. None of it was real, just shadows cast on a wall to make monsters where there were none. The emotional violence of a false flag isn't just in the act, it's in the betrayal. It hijacks grief and turns it into a weapon. It manipulates love of country, loyalty, and fear. It takes a population's raw wound and twists it into a blade to stab someone else. By the time the truth surfaces, if it ever does, the damage is already done. Wars have begun, lives have ended, lies have become doctrine. And that's the power of a false flag. It doesn't just kill the body, it kills truth. And in its place, it plants vengeance. And that vengeance burns brighter than any bomb. Total war. Total war is not just conflict, it is consumption. It is the moment when war invades every corner of life, every heartbeat, every home. There are no bystanders, no civilians, no safe places. Total war is when an entire nation becomes a weapon, when factories birth bullets instead of tools, when children grow up to the sound of air raids instead of lullabies, and when the line between soldier and citizen is violently erased. This tactic abandons limits. It targets not only armies, but economies, infrastructure, culture, and morale. It means starving the enemy's people, leveling their cities, breaking their spirit until surrender isn't just strategic, it's survival. Every school becomes a shelter, every meal is ration, every family waits for news or worse, for silence. It turns the living into fuel and the dead into warnings. Total war is terror institutionalized. It exploits every resource, money, labor, even belief. Governments use propaganda to convert doubt into loyalty, fear into rage. People are taught that peace is betrayal and mercy is weakness. Entire societies are reshaped into war machines, grinding endlessly, feeding on themselves. But beneath the strategy lies something darker, the emotional weight of knowing that no one is untouched, that your enemy sees your grandmother's warmth, your baby's cry, your city's skyline, not as sacred, but as targets. Total war doesn't just seek to defeat, it seeks to destroy, to erase the idea that the enemy ever had the right to resist. And once it begins, it doesn't end with victory. It ends with silence, a silence too heavy to celebrate, a silence filled with rubble, ghosts, and the knowledge that survival came at the cost of humanity itself. Limited war. Limited war is the conflict fought with chains on its fists and rules around its fire. It is the war that burns, but not to the ground. It's the decision to inflict pain while withholding annihilation, to fight with purpose, but not with everything. Unlike total war, where victory demands destruction, limited war is a chess game with blood on the board, fought for influence, position, and power without tearing the entire world apart. This tactic is rooted in control. It's a war fought under restraint of geography, of weaponry, of objectives. Nations enter it knowing they could do more, could unleash devastation, could flatten cities and silence populations, but they choose not to, or they pretend to, because the goal is never complete conquest. It is leverage. It is shaping the future without lighting it on fire. But this kind of war is psychological torment. For the soldiers fighting it, the boundaries are maddening. They're told to kill, but not too much, to advance, but not too far, to break the enemy's will, but not their infrastructure. That restraint becomes a burden, a constant second-guessing. They hold back not out of mercy, but because strategy demands it. And for those under attack, the fear is deeper. Limited war feels like waiting for something worse. Every bomb dropped could be the last, or just the beginning. Every ceasefire might collapse. It's a war with its claws half bared, still dangerous, still deadly, and constantly haunted by the question, what happens if the leash breaks? Proxy War. A proxy war is a battlefield without fingerprints, a violent symphony conducted from the shadows, where powerful nations pull strings while others bleed in their place. It is war without accountability, destruction wrapped in diplomacy, and manipulation cloaked in ideology. At its core, a proxy war is when two or more major powers avoid direct confrontation by fueling and financing conflicts through smaller, disposable actors. It is the coldest kind of war because those who cause it do not suffer it. This tactic feeds on desperation. Weaker nations or factions become pawns, seduced with weapons, funding, and promises of power. They fight not just their own battles, but the battles of unseen masters with far larger stakes. The chaos becomes a playground for influence. Each side escalates through their proxies, tipping the scale just enough to keep the war alive, but not enough to end it. The emotional cruelty of a proxy war is staggering. Civilians caught in the middle die for reasons that are never truly theirs. Cities are leveled for ideologies they never chose, and the puppeteers, safe in their distant halls, watch the bloodshed unfold like a game of chess. They test weapons, they gather data, they measure influence in lives lost. What makes proxy war so devastating is its deniability. No one ever claims it. No one takes responsibility. The world sees only local actors, civil unrest, or tribal conflict, never the cold hands feeding the fire from across the globe. And when the fighting ends, the ruins are left behind for the pawns to bury, while the powers who ignited the war walk away untouched, unseen, and utterly victorious. Urban warfare. Urban warfare is chaos trapped in concrete. It is the collapse of battle into narrow alleys, shattered windows, blood-slick stairwells, and rooms that breathe death behind every door. There is no front line here, only corners, only shadows, only the deafening echo of bullets ricocheting off walls that once held laughter, prayers, and family dinners. War in the city is not just destructive, it's intimate, and that is what makes it so terrifying. Fighting in urban terrain erases distance. Enemies are not across a field. They are behind walls, under floors, above ceilings. The ground is layered with hidden threats, IEDs in trash bins, snipers behind curtains, ambushes waiting in basements. The city becomes a labyrinth, and every street becomes a grave possibility. The buildings that once sheltered life now serve as traps, each window a barrel's eye, each hallway a funnel for fire. Emotionally, urban warfare is suffocating. The sensory overload is relentless. Rooftop explosions, crumbling facades, civilians screaming, babies crying through dust and blood. The line between soldier and survivor dissolves. Every civilian might be a threat. Every gesture might be bait. Paranoia becomes instinct. Compassion becomes a liability. And yet, it is in cities that the cost of war is most visible. Homes reduced to ash. Churches split by shellfire. Playgrounds riddled with bullets. The enemy isn't just military. It's memory, history, and humanity itself. Urban warfare doesn't just destroy structures, it erases identity. It forces soldiers to fight in the ruins of what once mattered, knowing that with every shot fired, something sacred dies behind the wall. There is no clean victory in a city, only survival and scars. Jungle warfare. Jungle warfare is a war of whispers, rot, and shadows. It is not fought on open plains or clean maps. It is fought in the breathing, choking green, where every leaf conceals danger, and every step could be your last. The jungle is not just a setting. It is an enemy in itself, humid, hostile, and alive. It swallows sound. It disorients. It punishes. And in its depths, the rules of conventional war do not apply. This tactic isn't about overwhelming force. It's about survival and suffocation. Visibility vanishes. Lines break. Coordination disintegrates under the weight of mud, disease, and dread. The jungle mocks technology. Guns jam. Radios fail. Helicopters crash into thick canopies. Men disappear, sometimes to ambush, sometimes to fear, sometimes to madness. Jungle warfare empowers the patient and punishes the proud. It favors small, nimble units that know how to blend into the environment, strike like venom, and vanish before a scream can echo. It's about setting traps, using terrain as a weapon, and watching as even the most disciplined enemy slowly descends into paranoia. The psychological damage is relentless. Sleep becomes a luxury. Insects bite flesh until it festers. Rain becomes constant. And worse than the bullets is the silence, the terrifying, humid silence that means you're being watched, that death is inches away, wearing green. It's a war of ghosts against giants, of hidden knives over heavy guns, and the jungle never chooses sides. It consumes the invader and the defender alike, slowly, mercilessly, until the only thing left untouched is the vines. Desert warfare. Desert warfare is a battle against the earth itself, a war fought not only against men, but against the sun, the sand, and the silence that stretches forever. In the desert, nothing hides you, nothing feeds you, nothing forgives you. It is a landscape that strips everything down to survival, where every step costs energy, every decision burns under the weight of heat, and every mistake is punished by a terrain that offers no second chances. This tactic demands a different kind of soldier, one who doesn't just fight the enemy, but endures the torment of nature's indifference. In desert warfare, heat is a weapon. It breaks machines, warps judgment, and drains the will to move. Water becomes more precious than ammunition. Shadows are rare currency. The sun doesn't just rise, it rains, searing skin, drying mouths, cooking metal and bone alike. Visibility is endless, yet deceptive. Sandstorms erase vision in seconds. Mirage becomes memory. Tracks vanish. Orientation collapses. The enemy can appear like a ghost, strike, and fade into the golden emptiness. Here, guerrilla tactics thrive. Mobility is king. Those who know the terrain, who read the dunes like maps, become predators. Those who don't are swallowed whole. Psychologically, desert warfare is isolation magnified. There are no forests to shelter in, no rivers to refresh in, no civilians to lean on. Just wind, heat, and fear. Communication falters, morale shrivels, and every soldier feels in the pit of their soul that the desert is always watching, always waiting to bury them in silence and sand. Mountain warfare. Mountain warfare is a confrontation with both man and nature, where every step is a struggle, every breath is thin, and every shot echoes through ancient stone like a warning from the gods. It is the kind of war that doesn't just test strategy, it tests the human spirit. In the mountains, the enemy is not only armed and waiting, it's the cold, the altitude, the unforgiving terrain that swallows the weak and isolates the strong. This form of combat demands more than courage. It demands endurance beyond reason. Soldiers carry their weapons, their supplies, and their fear up cliffs and across ravines, knowing that one slip means death. There are no smooth paths, no easy retreats. The land itself is a weapon, one that breaks bones, slows advances, and punishes hesitation with landslides and avalanches. Communication is fractured. Reinforcements arrive late, if they arrive at all. You are alone, exposed, and always climbing. What makes mountain warfare so emotionally brutal is the isolation. The silence between firefights is louder than the gunfire. The thin air burns your lungs. The cold turns your fingers into stone. And the enemy? They're not just shooting. They're waiting, above you, hidden, with gravity on their side and time as their ally. Every angle is a threat. Every ridge could be your last. To fight in the mountains is to face the raw edge of survival. It's not just about defeating an opposing force. It's about conquering your own fear, your fatigue, your breaking point. And when you win, there is no celebration. Only wind, only scars, only the haunting truth that the mountain never loses. It only lets you leave. Naval Landing. A naval landing is the moment war emerges from the sea like a beast, claws of steel and fire reaching for the shore. It is the terrifying spectacle of invasion made physical. Waves of troops crashing onto beaches, under the roar of artillery, aircraft screaming overhead, and sand soaked red before a single flag is raised. There is no hiding in a naval landing. There is only the sprint from death to dirt, the desperate fight to plant a foothold in a place that does not want you alive. This tactic is pure exposure. Soldiers step off landing crafts into gunfire, surf, and chaos. They are seen before they can shoot, targeted before they can breathe. The beach is a killing field, flat and open, and every inch gained is paid for in bodies. But still they advance, because behind them is the sea, and in front of them is the mission. Retreat is not an option. Only forward, only through. The emotional toll is unbearable. The anticipation is a slow torture, hours on ships, knowing what waits. The second the ramp drops, time shatters. Friends fall, orders blur. You're not charging, you're surviving. And yet, in that hell, courage ignites. It's not the absence of fear, it's the decision to move despite it. Naval landings are more than strategy. They are statements that no barrier, no ocean, no shoreline, no fortress is beyond reach. They announce arrival with thunder and flame, but they also mark sacrifice, because every soldier who runs toward that shore knows it may be the last step they ever take, and they take it anyway. Amphibious Assault. An amphibious assault is the violent collision of worlds, where sea meets land in a storm of steel, fire, and blood. It is the most vulnerable, the most exposed, and the most desperate moment in warfare, charging toward an enemy-guarded shoreline with no cover, no retreat, and no second chances. Every second from the boat to the beach is a prayer, whispered through clenched teeth, because once the ramp drops, the world explodes. This tactic is pure audacity. Soldiers step from water into chaos, often under relentless machine gun fire, mortar blasts, and mines buried in the sand. There is no place to hide. Every inch gained is earned with blood. Yet they push forward, not because it's safe, but because going back means death, and standing still means drowning in bullets. It is courage carved out of necessity, rage ignited by survival. Amphibious assaults break the mind as much as the body. They flood the senses, the smell of salt and smoke, the screams buried under artillery, the trembling earth under crashing shells. It's a baptism by fire, where men are forged or shattered in seconds. But when it works, when the beachhead is claimed and the tide turned, it becomes one of the most psychologically devastating reversals in war. The defenders, once sure in their fortress of cliffs and trenches, now watch as the enemy rises from the surf like demons. What was once a natural barrier has become their grave. There is no elegance in an amphibious assault, only fury, only chaos, only the undeniable will to bring war to the shore, no matter what waits on the other side. Airborne assault is the act of falling from the sky with the force of destiny, an attack that defies gravity, logic, and the natural order of war. It is not just a strike, it is a descent from the heavens, a controlled plunge into chaos where men turn the sky into a battlefield and bring war to places once thought untouchable. There is no warning, no rumble of tanks, no slow buildup, just the sudden scream of aircraft, the rush of wind, and soldiers raining down like thunder. The power of airborne assault lies in its brutality and unpredictability. It shatters the illusion of safe zones. It drops warriors behind enemy lines, deep into places where they should have no right to be, sowing fear like seeds in soil. Defenders, caught between fronts, crumble under the shock. They are not attacked from across the field. They are invaded from above. For the soldier, an airborne assault is a free fall into fire, parachuting through anti-aircraft flak, drifting helplessly as bullets tear the wind. They land disoriented, often scattered, already hunted before their boots touch earth. But once grounded, they rise not as survivors, but as saboteurs, assassins, disruptors of order. Their presence behind enemy lines is not just a threat, it is a nightmare come to life. Emotionally, the tactic is a declaration of dominance. It tells the enemy, not even the sky is yours. And in that moment, when the clouds tear open and war drops from above, every soldier on the ground learns something cold and unforgettable. Danger no longer approaches, it descends. Encroachment is the silent invasion, an insidious tactic that doesn't arrive with fanfare or fire, but with footsteps that seem harmless until they're everywhere. It is the slow, deliberate push into forbidden space, designed not to provoke immediate war, but to test boundaries, stretch nerves, and normalize the unacceptable. It is war without a declaration, conquest masked as caution, and dominance disguised as diplomacy. At first, it feels small. A patrol steps a few feet beyond a border. A base is built slightly too close. A flag is raised on disputed ground, justified with excuses, navigation errors, defensive necessities, miscommunication. The opponent hesitates. They don't want to escalate, so they issue warnings, file complaints, but they don't act. And that is the point, because each inch taken without consequence becomes precedent. Each delay in response becomes permission. The land changes hands, not through bloodshed, but through silence. Emotionally, encroachment is maddening. It forces restraint in the face of violation. It makes a nation question its strength, its leadership, its resolve. To respond harshly is to risk war. To do nothing is to lose dignity and territory. The enemy exploits that hesitation. They play the long game. Each encroachment chips away at sovereignty, at confidence, at peace. Those who master encroachment don't wear armor. They wear patience. They understand how humans normalize discomfort over time, how we accept what we once condemned, and by the time the line is finally drawn, it's no longer the old line. It's been redrawn, silently, permanently, under the boots of an enemy who never needed to fire a shot to win. Economic strangulation, Economic strangulation is the art of killing a nation without firing a single bullet, of turning currency into a weapon and hunger into submission. It is a cold, calculated tactic that bleeds a country from the inside, squeezing its lifelines until its people cry out in despair, until its leaders kneel not from conquest, but collapse. It is slow, it is invisible, and it is devastating in ways bombs could never be. This strategy targets the veins of survival: trade, fuel, medicine, food. Blockades are enforced, sanctions are imposed, allies withdraw, markets crash, factories die, and within months, the ripple hits the streets. Shelves go empty, jobs vanish, lights flicker out, families dig into savings, then into desperation. But the guns haven't fired, yet the suffering has begun. That is the cruelty of economic strangulation. It punishes the many to pressure the few. Emotionally, it is war without the fire, but all the agony. Children waste away not from wounds, but from malnutrition. Mothers barter heirlooms for bread. The enemy becomes abstract, not soldiers on the horizon, but unseen hands tightening an economic noose. There's no battlefield to flee, no trench to dig, just a slow decay of dignity. And still, it works. It turns the population against their own leaders. It destabilizes from within. It fuels rebellion. It collapses regimes, not through force, but through deprivation. Because when the stomach is empty, pride disappears. When medicine runs out, resistance falters. And when a country can no longer breathe economically, it doesn't need to be conquered. It surrenders itself, piece by piece, starved into silence. Strategic bombing. Strategic bombing is destruction from a god's height, cold, calculated, and horrifyingly impersonal. It is not aimed at soldiers. It is aimed at the soul of a nation, the factories, the roads, the homes, the families. It is war waged from the sky with the intent not just to cripple, but to crush the will to resist. It is the roar overhead, the siren scream, and the flash of fire that follows, all delivered by enemies you'll never see. This tactic is psychological devastation wrapped in metal and fire. It targets what people need to live: electricity, water, transportation, shelter. It ignites cities. It buries children beneath rubble. It drives mothers into shelters, praying the next blast won't find them. It replaces sleep with silence, waiting for the next thunder from above. There is no warning, no mercy, just annihilation at scale. Strategic bombing isn't about the battlefield. It's about breaking the spine of a country. It seeks to halt production, starve supply lines, paralyze communication, but even more cruelly, it aims to sap morale, to instill the belief that resistance only brings more suffering, that every act of defiance means another burning neighborhood, another cratered school, another ruined morning that never ends. And yet, it feeds rage too. Sometimes it backfires, hardens resolve instead of crushing it, but the cost remains unbearable. The ghosts it leaves behind scream louder than any siren ever could. Strategic bombing is not just a tactic of war. It is a message burned into the sky. You are not safe. Not here, not anywhere. Tactical bombing is precision brutality, a strike that doesn't just destroy, but surgically amputates the enemy's strength where it matters most. It is not about mass devastation or leveling cities. It is about timing, accuracy, and inflicting pain so exact, so deliberate, that the enemy's gears stop turning mid-grind. Supply routes, communication hubs, convoys, bridges, radar stations, ammunition dumps. These are the beating hearts of an army, and tactical bombing is the scalpel that cuts them out. This tactic isn't faceless, it's intimate. Pilots fly low, often under fire, weaving through flak and terrain, locking eyes with the chaos they're about to create. One bomb, one strike, one moment of pure calculated violence can alter the course of an entire campaign. The goal is disruption, to blind, starve, or paralyze the enemy before they ever reach the battlefield. But what makes tactical bombing truly terrifying is its precision. There's no safety in distance, no comfort in remoteness. Your base, your gear, your lifeline could be erased in a single breath of thunder from above. Soldiers learn to fear the whine of engines before the explosion, to flinch at shadows moving overhead, to understand that no matter how far from the front lines they stand, they are never beyond reach. Emotionally, it teaches helplessness, the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. It doesn't announce itself with a siege. It whispers death in moments, in corridors, in fields that once felt safe. Tactical bombing doesn't just destroy targets, it erases certainty, and in war, that alone is a weapon. Artillery barrage. An artillery barrage is thunder given form, an overwhelming storm of steel and fire that crashes down from unseen horizons with no face, no warning, and no mercy. It is the war tactic that makes the earth itself an accomplice, ripping open soil, shattering structures, and pounding human resolve into dust. The purpose is not just destruction, it is psychological domination. It is terror from above, designed to break the body and bend the mind. When the barrage begins, time becomes meaningless. Seconds stretch, eardrums rupture, the air thickens with smoke and screams. There is no direction, just noise, just impact, just fear. Soldiers huddle in trenches, praying not to be chosen by the next shell. Each explosion is a reminder that survival is random, that death comes without fairness or honor. It's not combat, it's punishment, a relentless battering that tells you you are not safe, not even when you're hiding. Artillery barrage doesn't ask for a fight, it simply announces dominance. It softens defenses before an advance. It traps the enemy in place. It tears morale to ribbons. And long after the last shell falls, its echo remains in shattered nerves, in haunted stares, in the way hands still shake at sudden thunder. Emotionally, it dehumanizes. It removes the face of the enemy. You're not being hunted by a man. You're being hunted by the sky. And that helplessness, that gut-wrenching vulnerability is what makes artillery so cruelly effective, because when the ground itself becomes the weapon, the only thing left to fight is fear, and fear doesn't bleed. Bait and trap. Bait and trap is the cruelty of control, an elegant manipulation of desire, fear, and instinct. It is the act of offering what the enemy craves most, a weakness, a gap, a target too tempting to ignore, and using that hunger to lead them straight into the jaws of destruction. It's not just strategy, it's seduction turned into slaughter, a performance in which the enemy writes their own doom, believing it to be opportunity. At the heart of this tactic is anticipation. You don't strike first, you prepare. You study the enemy's patterns, their ego, their impatience. You craft a lie so perfectly aligned with their ambitions that they don't hesitate. A retreating unit, an undefended hill, a stranded supply line, it's never real. It's bait, a story told with bodies and silence. And the moment they lunge, believing victory is within their grasp, the trap snaps shut. Reinforcements emerge. Artillery erupts. Escape vanishes. Emotionally, bait and trap is warfare at its most humiliating. It doesn't just beat the enemy, it makes them feel foolish. Their own choices become the weapon. Their own aggression becomes the reason they fall. It breaks more than bodies. It breaks trust in themselves, in their leaders, in their instincts. Every decision made afterward will carry hesitation because now they've learned not all openings are real. Some are graves. To use this tactic is to play with perception, to whisper, "Come closer," while sharpening the knife. It's not just about drawing them in, it's about making them believe it was their idea all along. Fortification. Fortification is the embodiment of defiance in stone and steel. It is the human instinct to draw a line, to build a wall, and to dare the world to try and break it. It stands not only as a physical barrier, but as a psychological monolith, declaring, "You will not pass here without a fight." To fortify is to prepare for the storm before it comes, to say, "I am not running." It is rooted in the primal urge to protect land, life, legacy. A fortress is more than architecture. It is a symbol. To the enemy, it is a warning. To the people behind it, it is hope. Every rampart, every trench, every turret becomes part of a message. We are still here. We will not fall easily. Fortifications transform a location into a statement of resistance, holding back entire armies, halting momentum, and testing the patience of even the most relentless commanders. But fortification does something darker too. It creates a siege of the mind. The attacker stares at thick walls and thinks about the blood it will cost to cross them. The defender, trapped inside, hears every echo of shell fire against their walls and wonders how long they can hold. The tension is unbearable, knowing the walls are your salvation, yet also your prison. There is no retreat, only the wait for the breach or the silence. To fortify is to anchor courage to the earth, to say, "Come, break yourself upon these walls," and to know that whether you fall or endure, your resistance will echo longer than any victory ever could. Sniper deployment. Sniper deployment is the silent heartbeat of death in war, the unseen judgment that watches from distance, breath held, trigger tense. It is not about chaos. It is about control. The sniper is not a soldier. They are a ghost, a shadow, a whisper with a scope, and when they strike, it is not with fury, it is with finality. One shot, one name erased from the war. This tactic is not just physical, it's psychological warfare carved into bone. A sniper doesn't just kill, they create fear that lives longer than the bullet's flight. Every soldier begins to feel watched. Every movement feels exposed. No one knows who the next shot is for. Morale begins to rot under the weight of paranoia. Helmets are worn tighter. Steps are taken slower. Conversations are whispered. The battlefield becomes quiet, not from peace, but from terror. Snipers are chosen not just for accuracy, but for patience. They wait hours, sometimes days, unmoving, invisible, fused into terrain. They study breath, wind, distance, heartbeat. They pick their moments like surgeons choosing where to cut. And when they strike, it's never random. It's strategic. Officers, medics, radio operators, each shot weakens the enemy's spine. To deploy a sniper is to declare that control can be taken from miles away, that even in stillness, there is power. And to face a sniper is to understand helplessness in its purest form, because in war, there is no greater fear than knowing death is watching, and you can't see its eyes. Booby traps. Booby traps are war's cruelest whispers, silent, unseen, and patient. They wait beneath the surface of ordinary things, smiling like death in disguise. A fallen helmet, a door slightly ajar, a harmless pile of leaves. They turn curiosity into catastrophe, routine into ruin. Unlike bullets or bombs, booby traps don't fight fair. They don't confront. They lure. They deceive. They make the enemy fear every step, every touch, every breath. The genius of the booby trap lies in its simplicity and sadism. It takes almost nothing to create, some wire, a pressure plate, a crude explosive. But its impact is devastating, not just physically, but psychologically. Once a soldier sees a friend blown apart by a step too eager, something changes. The terrain becomes a threat. The path becomes a puzzle. Progress turns into paranoia. They no longer walk. They tiptoe through death's minefield. Booby traps don't just kill, they haunt. Their victims are often unarmed, off guard, or simply unlucky. The randomness of the violence becomes its own message. You are never safe, not even when you think you've won. And that uncertainty, that invisible threat, corrodes confidence faster than any frontal assault ever could. For the one who sets them, booby traps are a force multiplier, a way to slow down a superior enemy, to strike without being seen, to instill fear without firing a shot. They require cunning, cruelty, and patience. And for the victim, there's no glory in dying by one, just silence, shock, and a brutal lesson. In war, sometimes what kills you isn't the enemy you see, but the one that waited for you to look away. Mind warfare. Mind warfare is war that waits. It is hatred buried beneath the earth, silent and still, until one wrong step rips flesh from bone and peace from memory. It is the most haunting form of violence, not in how it attacks, but in how it doesn't. It hides, it waits, it watches without eyes, and when it finally strikes, it punishes not just the soldier, but every child, every farmer, every passerby who dared to trust the ground again. This tactic turns terrain into treachery. Fields, roads, riversides, once safe, become riddled with unseen killers, anti-personnel mines for bodies, anti-tank mines for steel. They are laid in the dark, in desperation, in retreat, not for victory in the moment, but for suffering that outlives the battle. A soldier planting a mine knows the explosion might not happen today, might not happen tomorrow, but it will. And when it does, it won't ask questions. It won't show mercy. It will detonate with the cold, impersonal force of a war that never ended. Emotionally, mind warfare is terror embedded in routine. It forces every step to be second-guessed. It turns courage into caution, progress into paralysis. The sound of a footfall becomes a question of survival. And worse, long after treaties are signed, mines remain. They outlast presidents. They outlive armies. They wait for farmers harvesting, children playing, families fleeing. Mind warfare isn't just a tactic. It's a curse. A weapon designed not just to kill, but to haunt, to turn every inch of earth into a question no one wants to answer until it's too late. Use of decoys. The use of decoys is deception turned into an art form, a silent, cunning betrayal of the enemy's perception. It is not about brute force, but about misdirection, making them look left while you strike from the right, making them shoot at shadows while your real power slips by, untouched and unseen. A decoy isn't just a distraction, it's a psychological ambush. It manipulates trust in one's own senses, and once that trust is broken, panic follows. This tactic weaponizes belief. It creates illusions so convincing, so urgent, that the enemy wastes time, energy, and ammunition on phantoms. Dummy tanks sit on ridgelines, inflatable artillery points skyward. Fake radio chatter paints a picture of armies that don't exist. The battlefield becomes a stage, and the enemy, unwillingly, becomes part of your script. The emotional damage is subtle but devastating. When soldiers realize they've been firing at cardboard, when commanders divert forces toward a trap that never springs, they begin to doubt everything. Was that movement real? Was that explosion intentional? Every decision becomes a gamble, every hesitation a weakness. Decoys also create fear, not just of what is seen, but of what is unseen. If one target was fake, how many more are? The enemy begins fighting ghosts, second-guessing truth itself, and in that confusion, real danger slips through the cracks and strikes with merciless precision. The brilliance of a decoy is not in what it does, but in what it makes others do. It doesn't kill, it invites the enemy to kill themselves, through error, through distraction, through trust misplaced in a world carefully crafted to lie. Electronic jamming is silence turned into a weapon, a smothering force that kills without a sound, without a bullet, without even being seen. It is the invisible scream that drowns commands, blinds radars, and severs the nervous system of an army. In the modern battlefield, communication is life, coordination is survival, and jamming doesn't just interrupt, it isolates. It rips the mind from the body and leaves it paralyzed in chaos. This tactic is a form of digital suffocation. Radios crackle into static, GPS signals vanish, drones lose their vision, missiles veer off course, orders dissolve before they reach the front. The battlefield becomes a fog of uncertainty, units frozen in place, commanders screaming into silence, allies becoming strangers in the noise. And as confusion takes root, fear grows, not from gunfire, but from disconnection, from the terrifying realization that you are alone. Electronic jamming is warfare's quietest ambush. It happens before the bullets, before the bombs. It happens in the airwaves, in the satellites, in the frequencies no one sees but everyone depends on. It is disruption weaponized, control undone. To deploy this tactic is to control the tempo of war. The jammed can't plan, can't respond, can't breathe in the rhythm of battle. Their world becomes delayed, fractured, and vulnerable. Meanwhile, the jammers move with clarity, striking where response is impossible. There is something almost cruel in its elegance. No fire, no blood, just the surgical silence that breaks connection, and, with it, the will to fight. Because when your voice is gone, your vision blinded, your allies out of reach, even the strongest army feels like a ghost in its own war. Misinformation. Misinformation is the weapon that doesn't bleed. It infects. It doesn't explode. It corrodes. It's not about winning battles through strength, but through confusion, distortion, and control of what people believe to be true. Misinformation is the war fought in minds, not fields. It replaces clarity with chaos, turns facts into fog, and poisons decision-making until even the right move feels wrong. It starts small, a false radio broadcast, a fake report, a planted rumor. Soldiers are told reinforcements are coming when they're not. Civilians believe the front is holding until it collapses. The enemy hears whispers of betrayal within their ranks, and soon the truth becomes irrelevant. Perception rules everything. Morale breaks not because of what is, but because of what is believed. The emotional toll is devastating. Trust dies first. Leaders are questioned. Allies grow distant. Fear metastasizes. Soldiers hesitate. Commanders doubt their intelligence. Civilians panic. And the worst part? No one can see the battlefield anymore. It's been buried beneath lies and second-guessing. Every decision feels like walking through fog with a knife pressed to your back. Those who master misinformation understand something darker than strategy. They understand belief. They know that if you can control what someone thinks, you can control what they fear, what they resist, what they surrender. Misinformation turns strength into liability, unity into suspicion, and courage into collapse. It doesn't come with a blast. It comes with a whisper. And by the time the truth returns, it's often too late, because the damage has already been done in the silence between doubt and despair. Bribery of Commanders. Bribery of Commanders is betrayal purchased in silence, a tactic that poisons the chain of command, not with bullets or blood, but with whispers and gold. It is war waged in back rooms, behind closed doors, where loyalties are auctioned and battles are lost before they even begin. There is no honor in this act, only leverage, only manipulation, only the cold realization that for the right price, even the most trusted leader can become the enemy's greatest ally. This tactic is terrifying because it strikes at the heart of structure. Armies are built on trust, on the belief that orders come from strength, that commands lead towards survival, that leadership is sacred. But when a commander is bought, that entire belief system fractures. Soldiers die because their leader hesitated. Missions fail because routes were leaked. Fortresses fall not to siege, but to betrayal from within. The enemy doesn't need to storm the gates. They just need to pay someone to open them. Emotionally, the damage is corrosive. Troops begin to question every decision. Morale withers under suspicion. Rumors replace strategy. The battlefield becomes a stage of manipulation where sacrifice feels pointless because victory was never truly in their hands. And worse, once a commander sells out, the rot spreads, others follow, trust becomes currency, and loyalty becomes negotiable. Bribery of Commanders doesn't just shift power, it rewrites the outcome. It turns generals into ghosts in their own uniforms, and victory into something bought, not earned. It is the war behind the war, the betrayal no soldier sees coming until the bullet strikes from a direction it never should have. Turning the population. Turning the population is war fought, not with bullets, but with beliefs. It is the slow, deliberate poisoning of loyalty, the transformation of civilians from passive observers into willing allies or active betrayers of their own. This tactic doesn't conquer with force. It seduces. It listens. It understands the wounds of a people and whispers promises into them until the enemy's home becomes your strongest weapon. At its heart, turning the population is emotional warfare. It identifies grievances, poverty, oppression, fear, anger, and uses them as entry points. Propaganda becomes medicine, aid becomes influence, and slowly hearts begin to shift. A soldier is one thing, but a mother, a teacher, a farmer who begins to question the flag they once saluted, that is power far more dangerous. This tactic destabilizes from within. When people begin to sympathize with the enemy, the ground beneath the defending army collapses, intelligence leaks, support fades, morale withers, and the haunting question grows louder. Who can we trust? When every face in the crowd could be an informant, a saboteur, a hidden threat, the front line ceases to exist. Turning the population doesn't just change the course of battles, it changes the shape of war itself. It makes resistance look like liberation, it makes invaders look like saviors, and it makes victory feel like betrayal. Because when the people you once protected start opening their doors to your enemy, it's not just a tactical loss, it's the death of trust, the unraveling of identity, and the beginning of a war that no rifle can ever truly win. Hostage-taking. Hostage-taking is war's most intimate cruelty, the tactic that doesn't strike the soldier, but the soul. It is not about seizing ground, it is about seizing lives, real, fragile, innocent lives. It is a calculated act of terror, built on leverage, fear, and raw human emotion. When a hostage is taken, the battlefield shrinks. The war is no longer fought on maps or in trenches. It is fought in living rooms, in negotiation rooms, in the tight, trembling breath of those who know they are currency. This tactic is emotional warfare at its most ruthless. It forces decisions no commander should face. Do you strike and risk killing your own? Do you surrender to protect them? Do you wait, knowing that every second may be one too late? Hostage-taking takes the abstract violence of war and slams it into the personal. Mothers, children, leaders, friends. The human cost is no longer hidden behind statistics. It's staring you in the face, begging not to become another name on a list. But what makes this tactic so psychologically shattering is that it turns compassion into a weakness. It weaponizes empathy. The captor exploits it, knowing that the other side still cares, still values life. And in war, that flicker of humanity becomes a bargaining chip, soaked in blood. The hostage becomes both shield and sword. Their body blocks bullets, but their existence pierces decisions. Every scream, every televised plea is a knife in the chest of command. Hostage-taking doesn't just hold people, it holds the conscience of a nation at gunpoint. And when that's shattered, victory becomes irrelevant. All that's left is guilt and silence. Assassination. Assassination is the scalpel of war, precise, silent, and devastating. It is not a battle. It is not a war cry. It is the removal of a single beating heart to collapse an entire system, one life taken with purpose, one death that echoes louder than 1,000 bullets. The goal is never just to kill, it is to destabilize, to decapitate, to rip the spine from a movement, a government, an army, and watch it crumble under the weight of sudden chaos. Assassination preys on the illusion of invincibility. Leaders think they are untouchable. surrounded by guards, layers of protection, and the arrogance of power. But the assassin studies, waits, becomes a shadow in their schedule, a ghost in the routine, and when the moment comes, it is quick, surgical, final. A shot, a blade, a silent breath stolen, and everything changes. The emotional shock is immediate and paralyzing. Followers look to an absent figurehead, orders stop flowing, confidence shatters, and even if the enemy replaces the dead, the stain of vulnerability lingers. Who is next? Who can be trusted? The enemy is no longer fighting just a war. They are fighting fear. The knowledge that no one is safe, no matter how powerful, becomes a silent drumbeat in every decision. Assassination is the art of targeted terror. It is war waged with a whisper and ended with a single name crossed out. There is no battlefield, only aftermath. And in that vacuum, panic often grows faster than leadership can recover, because when a symbol dies, sometimes the soul of a cause dies with it. Use of terrain. The use of terrain is the art of letting the earth fight for you. It is the mastery of bending rivers, hills, forests, and valleys into weapons, of making the landscape itself a shield, a trap, a force multiplier. It is not just about where a battle is fought. It's about how every inch of land can be turned into a silent, deadly ally. Those who understand terrain don't just survive, they dominate, often without needing superior numbers or firepower. A skilled commander doesn't see a mountain as an obstacle. He sees elevation for ambush. He sees cover for concealment. He sees bottlenecks for slaughter. Forests become walls. Swamps become snares. Desert heat becomes a second army. When terrain is used well, it doesn't just slow the enemy. It weakens them, exhausts them, divides them, destroys them without warning. The emotional power of terrain use lies in its invisibility. The enemy doesn't always see what's killing them. They slip on rocks, march into traps, choke in narrow passes, get picked off from ridgelines they didn't even know were occupied. It breeds paranoia. They begin to question every movement, every path, every quiet hill. The ground beneath their feet stops feeling safe, and for the side that knows the land, it becomes sacred. Every crevice holds memory. Every path holds power. Fighters melt into it like ghosts, striking and vanishing. It's not just war, it's survival made strategic. When used right, terrain doesn't just support a battle, it becomes the battlefield's will itself, relentless, unforgiving, and impossibly patient. Weather manipulation, historical theories. Weather manipulation is the terrifying dream of playing God on the battlefield, a myth whispered through military history, where nature itself becomes an ally or a weapon. Though often shrouded in conspiracy and half-truths, the idea that storms can be summoned, rains prolonged, or skies darkened at will has haunted the minds of generals and enemies alike. Because what if the storm wasn't an accident? What if the mudslide wasn't nature, but intention? The emotional power of this tactic is immense, even when it's just believed to be real. The idea that your enemy can control the elements shatters the core human faith that nature is neutral. It creates paranoia, superstition, helplessness. Troops trudging through endless downpours or frozen in sudden cold begin to wonder, was this planned? Are we not just fighting men, but the sky itself? One infamous historical example is Operation Popeye during the Vietnam War, where the U.S. allegedly used cloud seeding to extend monsoon seasons and flood enemy supply lines. Whether myth or truth, the very possibility of this tactic became its own form of psychological warfare. It planted fear, it warped perception, and that alone is power. Weather is unforgiving enough on its own, but when it becomes weaponized, when rain erodes morale, fog blinds judgment, and snow isolates and kills, battlefield calculations crumble. Leaders lose control, troops lose hope. The war begins to feel cursed, because in the mind of a soldier soaked to the bone, slipping through mud, lost in fog, with thunder above, Sometimes the scariest thought is not that it's natural, but that someone made it happen. Network disruption. Network disruption is the silent decapitation of modern warfare. The moment the wires go dead, the screens go black, and an army built on coordination begins to devour itself. It is not a bomb, but its impact is explosive. It doesn't tear flesh, but it cripples control. In the age of digital war, where every move depends on data, signal, and sync, disrupting the network is not just an inconvenience, it's a surgical strike on the enemy's brain. One severed cable, one virus, one jamming frequency. That's all it takes to bring a complex operation to its knees. Units can no longer speak, drones lose guidance, missiles miss targets, surveillance goes dark, commanders are isolated in the noise of static, and fear begins to whisper, "We are blind." But the real power of network disruption is what it does to the soul, not the system. Soldiers begin to feel alone. Every order becomes suspect. Every delay breeds doubt. Was that silence a mistake, or has the chain of command been cut? The battlefield becomes a maze without maps. Timing disintegrates. Plans fall apart. Panic fills the spaces where certainty used to live. This tactic feeds on our dependency, on our belief that the screen will always glow, that the signal will always come, and when it doesn't, the silence becomes deafening. That silence tells the enemy, your strength was never yours, it lived in the cables, and we just ripped them out. In that moment, victory isn't won with firepower, it's won with a blackout. And in the dark, no one leads, no one follows, no one survives intact. Fire arrow attack. The fire arrow attack is war set ablaze, rage given wings, destruction tied to the wind. It is one of the oldest tactics in human history, yet its impact is as visceral today as it was centuries ago. At its core, it is a simple, devastating truth. When fire touches fear, it spreads faster than any army ever could. A single flaming arrow isn't just a weapon, it's a warning, a spark that ignites panic before it burns flesh. This tactic is psychological as much as it is physical. Fire does not discriminate. It leaps from rooftop to rooftop, devours supply carts, consumes the very ground beneath one's feet. When arrows arc through the sky like falling stars, trailing flames behind them, defenders don't just fight, they scramble. Soldiers break rank, civilians scream, horses rear. Chaos erupts not from the kill, but from the terror of what's coming. Fire is a promise no one wants fulfilled. A fire arrow attack targets what the enemy clings to for safety. Structures, food, stability. It burns their shelter, their stockpiles, their morale. A fortress becomes a furnace. A camp becomes an inferno. The enemy watches everything they built turn to smoke, and in that smoke they lose clarity, direction, and often the will to resist. Emotionally, it's a tactic that reaches deep into the human psyche. Fire is primal. It reminds us of how quickly things can end, how fragile comfort truly is, and when it falls from the sky like a curse, when even the air glows with threat, what dies first is not the body. It's the belief that tomorrow will still be there to fight for. Chariot Charge. A chariot charge is war unleashed with thunderous speed, an ancient storm of iron, wheels, and fury thundering across open ground, shaking the earth before the killing even begins. It is the embodiment of momentum turned into terror. Dust clouds rise, horses scream, blades gleam in the sun, and in those final moments before impact, the enemy doesn't just see a threat approaching, they see their courage evaporating. The chariot is more than a vehicle. It is a declaration, a moving wall of death that combines speed, shock, and psychological obliteration. When a line of chariots barrels down on infantry, shields tremble, formations break, fear takes root before the first sword is drawn. And that's the secret. The true power of the chariot charge is not in the metal it carries, but the panic it creates. Emotionally, it is unstoppable force personified. It reminds the enemy how small they are, how fragile. A soldier might stand firm against another man, but against galloping beasts and spiked wheels, against the roar of hooves and the weight of God's made war machines, that's when discipline dies. That's when instincts scream, run. The commanders who wield chariot charges don't just aim to kill, they aim to collapse, to shatter the spine of morale in a single breathtaking sweep. It's not subtle, it's not surgical, it's raw dominance. The earth shakes, the sky fills with dust, and the front line disappears beneath the crush. And once that wall breaks, once the enemy scatters, what follows is not a fight. It's a hunt. Cavalry Raid. A cavalry raid is war unleashed at lightning speed, steel and fury crashing into the enemy's soft underbelly before they even know where the pain is coming from. It is not meant to hold ground, but to ignite chaos, to strike hard, vanish fast, and leave behind a trail of confusion, fear, and bleeding silence. It is the howl of hooves in the night, the glint of sabers in firelight, the scream of a supply line torn open by thunder on horseback. This tactic thrives on speed and terror. A well-executed cavalry raid doesn't just damage logistics, it infects the enemy's thoughts. Roads are no longer safe, communications go dead, ammunition depots erupt in flame, and worst of all, by the time a response is organized, the raiders are gone, leaving behind only burning embers and questions with no answers. Psychologically, it's devastating. Soldiers who never see the enemy begin to fear shadows. Commanders start moving more cautiously. Entire operations stall, not because of a battle, but because of what might happen if they move too quickly, too confidently. The cavalry raid turns mobility into a weapon and timing into a scalpel. And the sound of it, the distant thunder of hooves, the rising panic in a camp jolted from sleep, is unforgettable. It's not just destruction, it's humiliation. The defenders are left chasing ghosts, their pride wounded deeper than their flesh. Cavalry raids are not about numbers, they are about momentum, precision, fear, and the raw, primal shock of being attacked from nowhere by warriors who never stop moving, never stop cutting, and never stop coming. Tank breakthrough. A tank breakthrough is not an advance. It's a rupture. It's steel and thunder crashing through the enemy's heart like a fist through glass. It's not subtle. It's not patient. It's an unstoppable surge of armored fury designed to smash through defensive lines, rip open formations, and create chaos so violent that command collapses before the dust even settles. When tanks roll in formation with their barrels forward and engines screaming, they don't ask for space. They take it. This tactic is pure momentum. Artillery softens the front, infantry probes for weak points, and then the tanks charge, massive, merciless, and deafening. They flatten trenches, crush barricades, and turn defensive walls into debris. Once through, they don't stop. They pierce deep, aiming not just to destroy, but to unravel the enemy's order from the inside out. Behind the tanks come waves of troops, support vehicles, and supply columns, flooding into the breach before defenders can recover. But the real devastation is psychological. When tanks burst through, they become monsters in the eyes of the enemy, too fast to stop, too powerful to resist. Soldiers panic, units scatter, radios scream confusion. The chain of command fractures under the pressure. What once felt like a wall of defense becomes a broken mirror reflecting nothing but loss. Tank breakthrough is not just force, it's fear incarnate. It's the sound of control shattering and the sight of safety disappearing under the tracks of machines built to dominate. And by the time defenders realize what's happened, they're no longer fighting a battle. They're drowning in it. Strategic encampment. Strategic encampment is the art of turning stillness into strength, of choosing not just where to rest, but where to dominate. It is the deliberate act of planting your presence in a place so carefully chosen, so tactically alive, that your mere positioning becomes a message. We are here. We are ready. We are unmovable. This is not just setting up tents and fires. This is laying down control, line by line, shadow by shadow. A strategic encampment is built not for comfort, but for leverage. Elevated ground, natural barriers, choke points, access to water, escape routes. It transforms the terrain into a living defense. But beyond the physical, it is psychological. The enemy sees your camp and knows you're not drifting through the war. You're watching, you're waiting, you've turned the earth into your ally. For the soldiers inside, it is more than shelter. It is a fortress of focus, a place that says, we are not just surviving, we're calculating. It keeps them rested yet alert, protected yet mobile. It becomes the heart of operations, a space where fear doesn't grow wild, but is tamed and sharpened into readiness. For the enemy, it's maddening. They know they can't simply attack without bleeding for it. Every approach is visible. Every angle has been considered. And the longer the camp stands, the stronger its roots dig in, until it feels less like a campsite and more like a noose tightening around their options. Strategic encampment is not stillness. It is coiled power. It is a pause sharpened into a blade. And when the time comes to move, it is not retreat. It is release. Deliberate, merciless, and always one step ahead. Wedge Formation. The wedge formation is a weapon shaped like willpower, a sharp triangular spear of human force designed to pierce, fracture, and split an enemy straight down the middle. It is not meant to surround. It is meant to drive through. At its heart is a single truth. When you cannot go around your enemy, you go through them. And when the wedge moves, it doesn't just break lines. It breaks spirits. The front of the wedge is the tip, heavily armed, heavily trained, and absolutely fearless. These are the shock troops, the battering ram in flesh and steel. Behind them, each rank fans out wider, like wings. Momentum builds with every step. The force tightens into unity. When the wedge hits, it hits like a spine-cracking punch, disorienting, violent, surgical. But the power of the wedge isn't just its physical thrust, it's psychological rupture. It doesn't attack around your army, it divides it. One side pulled left, the other right. Orders scramble, commanders lose sight of their men. Panic begins to replace coordination, and as confusion spreads, the wedge continues driving deeper, each second making the breach more irreversible. To the enemy, it feels like being split apart at the soul. It feels like being invaded from within. From the moment the tip breaks the line, the question becomes not how to stop it, but how to survive it. Because a wedge doesn't hesitate, it doesn't shift, it doesn't scatter. It's focused destruction given form, cutting into the heart of resistance and leaving only fragments behind. It is not just a formation, it is a declaration. We will not stop until we have torn your strength in two. Square Formation. The square formation is the fortress that moves, a living wall of resolve forged from discipline, fear, and the instinct to survive encirclement. Born from the terror of cavalry charges, it was not a tactic of aggression, but of defiance. It is the moment soldiers stand back to back, facing outward, knowing there is nowhere to run, and choosing to become an immovable shape of steel and unity in the face of overwhelming odds. When cavalry thunder across the field, hooves pounding like war drums, the natural reaction is to scatter, to run. But the square denies that instinct. It demands that men suppress their fear, tighten the ranks, and become a singular body. Bayonets point outward on every side. There are no weak spots, no exposed flanks. The message is clear. You will not break us. It is a wall made of humans, terrified, tense, and unyielding. The square punishes chaos and rewards control. One man faltering, one corner folding, and the entire formation crumbles. That pressure binds them. Fear becomes focus. The sound of the enemy's charge isn't met with panic. It's met with silence, breath held, muscles clenched, and when the horses veer off or crash into spears, a brutal truth is reinforced. Unity is stronger than force. Emotionally, The square formation is about dignity under siege. It is the image of resolve surrounded by destruction, of courage drawn in geometry. It turns the vulnerable into a weapon, the surrounded into survivors. In the heart of the battlefield, where death comes from all sides, the square is not just a shape, it is a decision, to stand, to endure, and to defy. Pitched battle. A pitched battle is war in its most primal, most theatrical form, a chosen field, two armies face to face, no retreat, no disguise, no secrets. It is the collision of fury and will, where everything is laid bare, strength, strategy, pride, and the lives of thousands. The pitched battle is not an ambush, not a trick, not a slow decay. It is the storm breaking all at once. A brutal, glorious chaos where blood answers blood and survival is paid for in steel. This tactic is about control, choosing the moment, the ground, and the terms of the fight. It forces clarity. All deception dies at the start line. What remains is noise, clashing shields, screaming men, pounding hooves, and the gut-deep terror of knowing that the enemy is not a rumor, but a face, rushing toward you with a sword in hand. In a pitched battle, death is everywhere. It doesn't creep, it charges. The emotional weight is soul-crushing. There's no hiding, no quiet death. It's all exposed. The fear in the eyes of the man beside you, the roar of your commander forcing courage into your spine. For those who survive, it becomes a memory that never leaves. For those who fall, it's often in the mud, beneath the weight of someone else's last breath. Pitched battles define empires. They're where reputations are made or broken in a single day, where fate is decided not by whispers or politics, but by muscle, fury, and who can endure the storm without flinching. Line formation. Line formation is discipline made deadly, a wall of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, presenting a unified front of power, precision, and purpose. It is the art of making many fight as one, where cohesion matters more than courage, and where the strength of the unit crushes the glory of the individual. In the line, there is no room for ego, only synchronization, only survival through unity. The brilliance of the line lies in its simplicity. A straight line maximizes firepower, vision, and control. Each soldier sees the enemy, each weapon has space to strike, and when drilled to perfection, it becomes an unbreakable barrier of death. Shields up, spears out, rifles aimed. The line does not chase, it holds. And when it moves like a wave of resolve, washing over the field with mechanical grace and terrifying steadiness. Emotionally, standing in line formation is a test of nerves. You are exposed, vulnerable, and unable to break. If the man next to you falls, you close the gap. If fear claws at your chest, you bury it. Because if one man flees, the line fractures, and death floods in. That pressure binds soldiers tighter than any chain. For the enemy, the line is a wall of inevitability, a symbol of trained, unrelenting force. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply exists, and it dares you to try and break it. And when it holds, when it pushes forward in perfect unison, it becomes more than formation, it becomes fate. Pitched battle. A pitched battle is war laid bare, no hiding, no deception, no retreat. It is the terrifying purity of two forces standing face to face, drawn out into the open, with only blood, steel, and sheer will to decide who walks away. This is where bravery becomes brutal, where strategy gives way to survival, where every soldier knows this is the day it ends for one of us. In a pitched battle, there is no mystery. The time is set, the ground is chosen, the armies form ranks beneath the open sky, banners wave, weapons glint, hearts thunder, and then the silence dies, replaced by the deafening roar of war unleashed all at once. Thousands charge, thousands scream, shields clash like thunder. The ground drinks from the wounded, and there is no room to think, only to fight, to push, to kill, or be crushed. beneath the tide. Emotionally, a pitched battle is unbearable in its finality. There is no escape, no second chance. Every warrior feels the weight of fate on their shoulders. They lock eyes with death, not from afar, but at arm's length. They see friends fall beside them. They feel the world narrow to the space of a sword's reach. And yet, they fight on, because in that chaos, in that shared madness, there is something sacred, the chance to stand firm when everything screams to run. Victory in a pitched battle is not just won. It is earned through agony, through stubbornness, through the refusal to fall before the other man does. And when it ends, there is silence again. But it is never the same, because the ground remembers, and so do the survivors. Shield wall. The shield wall is defiance given form, a solid line of unbreakable will, forged shoulder to shoulder, where fear is crushed beneath discipline and the instinct to survive becomes collective power. It is not flashy, it is not fast. It is the grinding, disciplined resistance that turns flesh into fortress, men into machine, and chaos into order. When a shield wall stands, it says one thing: you will not pass. Every warrior in the wall knows the rule: hold your ground, do not break, because the strength of the shield wall is not in the individual, but in the unity. One shield covers you, yours covers the next. It is a bond of blood and breath, and when the enemy crashes into it, screaming and swinging, they meet not men, but a wall of iron resolve that does not flinch. The emotional power of the shield wall lies in its simplicity. It is survival, stripped down to its most primal truth. Stay together or die alone. In the crush of battle, you feel the pressure. Your arms burn, your ears ring, your knees shake, but you don't fall. Because if you fall, the wall cracks. If the wall cracks, the line breaks. And when the line breaks, death floods in. It is claustrophobic. It is brutal. Blood runs down your boots. You hear bones snap behind you, swords slam in front of you, and still you hold. Not for glory, not for victory, but because in that line, in that moment, you are part of something greater than fear. And nothing is more terrifying to the enemy than a wall that does not move and will not break. Phalanx. The phalanx is not a formation. It is a fortress made of flesh and steel, a living wall of shields and spears, locked in unbreakable unity, advancing not with speed, but with crushing inevitability. It is the ancient embodiment of collective survival, where the strength of one means nothing, but the strength of many moving as one becomes unstoppable. In the phalanx, individuality dies, but in its place rises something far more terrifying: order in the face of chaos. Each soldier in the phalanx is a piece of a greater body, shield to the left, spear to the right. Your life depends on the man beside you, and his life depends on you. Trust is not optional, it is breath. If one breaks, all fall. But when it holds, it becomes invincible. The wall advances slowly, step by deliberate step, grinding over enemy lines like a millstone. And behind those locked shields is not rage, it is discipline, absolute and cold. Emotionally, the phalanx is suffocating for both those within and those facing it. Inside, there's no room for fear, no space to run, only the weight of armor, the stink of sweat, the scream of metal against bone. Outside, the enemy sees death approaching in silence, in symmetry, in the gleam of synchronized doom. Arrows bounce off, cavalry shatters, even courage wilts against its resolve. To face a phalanx is to feel helpless. To be inside one is to be part of something greater than fear. It is not a charge, it is not a dance, it is a slow, deliberate sentence of domination, one step at a time. Guerilla Sabotage. Guerilla Sabotage is the war you never see coming, the strike that doesn't seek glory, only damage. It's the tactic of ghosts and fire starters, of fighters who live in shadows and leave behind nothing but wreckage. It's not about territory, It's not about honor. It's about crippling the giant with 1,000 tiny cuts, each one designed to bleed morale, slow movement, and break the illusion of control. This tactic thrives in silence, a railroad destroyed in the dead of night, a supply truck found burned by dawn, communication lines cut, ammunition stolen or spiked. Every act of sabotage sends a chilling message. You are vulnerable. Guerrilla fighters don't wear uniforms. They don't follow rules. They live among civilians, strike without warning, and disappear before retaliation can catch its breath. Guerilla sabotage feeds on frustration. It turns the enemy's size against them. The more they rely on logistics, the more there is to target. The more they need order, the more chaos hurts. And every time something breaks, every time a convoy is delayed, a base loses power, a weapon jams unexpectedly, the question spreads like infection. Who did this? How are they always ahead? Emotionally, it is maddening. The enemy cannot fight back against shadows. They grow paranoid. They punish the innocent. They lose focus. And the more they try to tighten their grip, the more it slips. Sabotage doesn't win with explosions. It wins with erosion. It is patience weaponized, using precision and defiance to tear down an empire, not with armies, but with the knowledge that even the most powerful machine can be undone. One wire, one wheel, one whisper at a time. Massing of firepower. Massing of firepower is war at its loudest, its heaviest, its most unforgiving. It is the act of concentrating overwhelming force on a single point until that point ceases to exist. No subtlety, no finesse, just raw, unrelenting destruction. It is the decision to not just defeat the enemy, but to erase them, to drown them in thunder so relentless that their spirit shatters before their bodies do. This tactic is rooted in one terrifying idea. Nothing survives the storm. Artillery, missiles, machine guns, airstrikes, focus, synchronize, and unleashed on a precise target. It's not a wave, it's a wall of lead, flame, and fury that smothers any hope of resistance. The ground trembles, the air thickens with smoke and fire, and every defender in the strike zone knows, deep in their gut, that they've been chosen to vanish. But what truly makes massing of firepower so devastating is its emotional impact. Before it even hits, the anticipation kills. You hear the jets, you feel the rumble of the guns, you know it's coming, and you know you can't stop it. Radios scream, orders collapse, soldiers bury their heads and pray, not for victory, but for survival. It is a psychological surrender before the physical one ever begins. This is not a tactic for balance. It is a tactic for annihilation. It is war's answer to doubt. It says, you may have courage, you may have numbers, but we have power, and we will bring it down on you like the hand of a god. And once it starts, there is no hiding, only surviving what's left, if anything is left at all. Suppressive fire. Suppressive fire is fear turned into a storm, an unrelenting hail of bullets designed not to kill, but to control. It is the language of dominance spoken through the stutter of machine guns and the thunder of rifles. The goal is not always death. The goal is paralysis, to make the enemy afraid to lift their head, to silence movement, to pin them down so thoroughly that even the thought of resistance dies beneath the noise. This tactic floods the battlefield with chaos. A steady, deafening rhythm of fire rains down on enemy positions, trenches, buildings, trees, and suddenly they are trapped, not physically, psychologically. Every twitch feels fatal. Every breath feels borrowed. They don't know when it will stop. They don't know when it will shift. They only know that if they rise, if they run, if they move even an inch, they may not get the chance to do it again. Emotionally, suppressive fire is torment. It doesn't end with a bang. It drones on, grinding the nerves, fraying the mind. It turns fighters into prisoners behind their own cover. It transforms a confident unit into a group of desperate survivors, flinching with every burst, praying for silence that never comes, and all the while the clock ticks and the enemy advances. For the one laying down the fire, it's a display of control, not just over space, but over emotion, over time. It says, "You do not move unless I allow it." Suppressive fire doesn't seek glory, it seeks domination, one bullet at a time. Airlift Logistics is the beating heart of modern warfare that never touches the battlefield. Yet without it, the battlefield starves. It is war fought with wings instead of rifles, where planes become lifelines and runways become arteries. This tactic is about speed, precision, and the quiet, invisible miracle of keeping men alive when everything around them is designed to kill. It is the answer to the unanswerable question: how do you keep fighting when you're surrounded, cut off, and running out of time? Airlift is not glamorous. It's not heroic in the traditional sense, but it is critical. When a unit is stranded behind enemy lines, when a city is under siege, when terrain makes roads impassable and hope begins to thin, airlift steps in. C-130s roar through hostile skies, dodging gunfire and storms to drop ammunition, food, fuel, medicine, and sometimes soldiers themselves. One pallet can mean survival. One delivery can shift momentum. Emotionally, airlift logistics carries a gravity that few ever see. It is trust personified. The man in the trench doesn't know the pilot's name. He doesn't see the loading crews sweating on the tarmac. But when the packages fall, when the engines thunder overhead, it feels like someone still remembers them, like they are not forgotten. And for the pilots, every mission is a gamble. They don't attack, they endure, flying into danger, not to kill, but to save, not for glory, but for necessity. Because wars aren't won just by who shoots best. They're won by who stays standing longest, and that often depends on the wings above, delivering life into hell, over and over again. Denial of resources. Denial of resources is war by starvation. It is not a direct assault. It is a slow, suffocating stranglehold that tightens around the enemy's lifeline until they can no longer move, no longer fight, no longer breathe. This tactic doesn't aim to kill the soldier. It aims to kill the system that feeds him. It is about removing what sustains an army: fuel, food, water, ammunition, medicine, communication, and letting deprivation finish what bullets never had to start. It begins with disruption. Supply lines are targeted, bridges are destroyed, roads are mined, storage depots are set ablaze, convoys vanish without explanation, and soon the enemy is not asking, "How do we win?" They're asking, "How do we survive another day?" But the true damage lies deeper than physical loss. It's emotional collapse. Soldiers begin to ration hope alongside water. Morale withers with every empty stomach, every dry canteen, every letter that never arrives. Weapons become useless without ammo. Tanks become monuments without fuel. Wounded men suffer without morphine. Commanders are left making impossible decisions with nothing but silence in their hands. The enemy becomes trapped in a slow implosion, watching as strength slips through their fingers, not from combat, but from absence. They are forced to eat less, move less, think less, and the longer they hold out, the weaker they become, until surrender feels less like defeat and more like mercy. This tactic is cruelty in calculation. It doesn't conquer the body, it breaks the will, and once the hunger sets in, real hunger, for supplies, for control, for hope, defeat isn't just inevitable, it's already underway. Poisoning wells. Poisoning wells is the war tactic that spits in the mouth of mercy. It is vengeance disguised as strategy, and desperation turned into disease. It is not meant to win a battle. It is meant to make living the enemy's punishment. It doesn't confront the army with guns or blades. It waits, patient and rotting, inside the very thing they trust: water. This tactic is as ancient as it is cruel. Armies move, civilians flee, and in their wake, the retreating force corrupts the one resource that sustains all life: a drop of toxin, a carcass in the water, a subtle death that arrives slow, disguised as thirst quenched. The enemy drinks and feels relief until their bodies betray them, until sickness spreads through camps, until commanders have to choose between halting the advance or watching their men die without a single shot being fired. But the true impact of poisoning wells is psychological. It's not just death, it's doubt. Every sip becomes suspicion. Every clear stream becomes a trap. Soldiers grow paranoid. Civilians grow desperate. Hygiene collapses. The fear of unseen death turns even survival into a gamble, and the horror of watching comrades writhe in agony from what should have saved them lingers longer than bullets ever could. This is a tactic born not of glory, but of spite, of the bitter belief that if you must lose ground, you will leave behind only ruin. It is scorched earth turned inward, targeting the most human need, because when water turns to poison, even hope begins to taste like ash. And in that bitterness, the enemy learns, you may win the land, but you will suffer for every inch you take. Civilian displacement. Civilian displacement is war that wounds without bullets, an invisible tide of devastation that uproots homes, erases identities, and turns families into refugees overnight. It is not about winning a battle, it's about breaking a people, about forcing them to run from everything they've ever known, the cradle of their childhood, the graves of their ancestors, the walls that once held warmth and safety. Displacement is the silent violence that echoes louder than explosions, because it doesn't kill the body, it kills belonging. This tactic is cold and calculated. Villages are bombed, roads are mined, crops are burned. Fear is seeded like shrapnel in the hearts of civilians until they flee, not out of choice, but survival. Homes are left to rot, schools are left empty, and the land becomes a ghost of itself. Displacement strips a people of roots, scattering them like ashes in the wind, turning culture into memory and identity into longing. Emotionally, it is devastating. Imagine walking away from everything, your bed, your neighbors, your language, and knowing you may never return. Imagine telling your children that the place where they were born no longer exists. The pain is generational. The trauma echoes through time. And for those who use this tactic, that is the goal. Because when civilians flee, the enemy loses support. Logistics crumble. Communities fracture. It weakens the will to resist. It clears the battlefield without a shot being fired. Civilian displacement doesn't leave scars on skin. It leaves them on souls. And long after the war ends, the wounds remain, etched into silence, into absence, into the question, where do we belong now? A deception campaign is war without violence until it's far too late. It is the weaponization of illusion, the orchestration of lies so convincing they become reality. This tactic doesn't strike with swords or shells. It strikes with belief, with planted evidence, with fake movements, false signals, ghost armies. It manipulates perception until the enemy walks willingly into their own destruction, convinced they are chasing victory. At the heart of a deception campaign lies control, not of territory, but of the enemy's mind. You feed them what they want to see, a fake buildup on one front to draw troops away from the real objective, bogus radio transmissions, phony infrastructure, inflatable tanks, actors in uniform. It sounds absurd until it works, until they redeploy based on shadows, until they dig defenses in the wrong direction, until their intelligence becomes their noose. Emotionally, deception campaigns are devastating because they breed humiliation. The enemy doesn't just lose, they are outwitted, outsmarted. They realize too late that the battlefield was never where they thought, that they defended illusions while the real blow struck elsewhere. It crushes morale, it fractures trust. Soldiers begin to question every command, every report, every order. Suspicion replaces discipline. And worse, success breeds paranoia. Once fooled, the enemy sees tricks in everything. They hesitate, delay, second guess. And in war, hesitation is death. A deception campaign isn't about being stronger, it's about being smarter. It is the whispered lie that outlasts the shouted truth. It is the art of letting the enemy believe they are winning until the trap snaps shut and they realize they were never even in the right war. Rear guard action. Rear guard action is the act of staying behind when everyone else runs forward or flees. It is not glamorous. It is not about winning. It is about sacrifice, endurance, and the brutal responsibility of buying time with blood. When an army retreats or maneuvers, someone must hold the line. Someone must face the advancing enemy, knowing full well they may not survive. That someone is the rear guard. This tactic is war at its most selfless. The rear guard does not fight to gain ground. They fight to slow the enemy, to confuse, delay, and disrupt their advance long enough for others to regroup, escape, or reposition. They are the buffer between annihilation and survival, and the weight of that duty is crushing. Psychologically, it is warfare inside the soul. The soldiers of the rear guard must face overwhelming odds with no illusion of victory. They know reinforcements won't come. They know the others will keep moving while they stay. Every minute they hold out feels like an hour. Every inch of retreat behind them a reminder of what they're protecting and what they're giving up. To the enemy, the rear guard is frustrating, infuriating. Just when they expect collapse, they find resistance. Just when they press forward, they're met with fire, traps, defiance. It breaks momentum, it stalls pursuit, and sometimes that single delay saves hundreds. A rear guard action is a final stand without the fanfare. It is courage not for glory, but for duty. And when the dust settles, often the only proof it ever happened is the silence that follows and the lives that were spared because someone chose to stay. Long-range harassment. Long-range harassment is the war tactic that breaks you from a distance, slowly, relentlessly, and without warning. It doesn't seek direct confrontation. It doesn't want to overpower you in a glorious clash. It wants to wear you down. It wants to haunt you, to steal your rest, to make every moment feel like the prelude to something worse. It's not a battle. It's psychological erosion launched from miles away. This tactic uses snipers, artillery, drones, missiles, any method that can strike without the enemy ever laying eyes on you. It hits supply convoys on lonely roads. It picks off sentries in the dead of night. It rains shells onto outposts at irregular intervals, denying sleep, routine, and security. And then it disappears, leaving only smoke, wreckage, and the echo of uncertainty. The genius of long-range harassment is that it doesn't need to kill in large numbers to succeed. It only needs to remind that nowhere is safe, that someone is always watching, that death can arrive at any time from beyond the horizon. Over time, morale collapses, exhaustion sets in, soldiers flinch at every noise, their hands tremble on their rifles, they snap at each other. Discipline phrase, it is warfare as slow torment, where the enemy begins to fight not you, but their own fear, and the more they retreat inward, the more control you gain. It's a tactic of patience, of cruelty, of breaking the will before touching the body. Because in war, sometimes you don't need to crush the enemy, you just need to make them wish it would end. And long-range harassment makes sure that wish comes every day. Forced march. A forced march is exhaustion turned into a weapon, a merciless push through pain, hunger, and agony, where the battlefield is not a place, but the human body itself. It is the cruel command to keep moving when every muscle screams to stop, when every step feels like surrender, and yet halting means death. In war, movement is life, and a forced march strips that truth down to its rawest form. Move or die. Rest is a luxury no one can afford. This tactic is used when time is blood, when reinforcements must arrive before a position falls, when retreat must happen before encirclement, or when pursuit must be relentless, breaking the enemy spirit by showing them there is no escape. Soldiers are pushed to the brink, marching for miles with blistered feet, empty stomachs, and eyes that no longer blink. There is no warmth, no pause, just mud, cold, and the unrelenting voice of command yelling forward. Emotionally, a forced march is war's deepest misery. It is silence between screams. Comrades collapse. Some never get back up. The strong carry the weak carry the dead. It's not just about distance, it's about endurance, about proving that will can override pain, that the mission matters more than the flesh. But sometimes it becomes cruelty for cruelty's sake, used by tyrants to punish, to exhaust, to break. Prisoners of war, civilians driven from homes, legs swollen, souls numb. It's not just a journey, it's suffering stretched over miles. A forced march doesn't always end in battle. Sometimes it ends with no one left to fight. Controlled withdrawal. Controlled withdrawal is the courage to walk away, not in defeat, but with deliberate defiance. It is the tactic of retreating not in fear, but with focus, discipline, and strategy. This is not a rout. This is not surrender. It is the act of pulling back with precision, bleeding the enemy as you go, denying them their victory even as you give them ground. It is war's version of exhaling before striking again. There is a savage beauty to a retreat done right. Troops disengage under fire, covering one another in rotation, holding the line just long enough to break contact, then vanishing like ghosts into safer terrain. Traps are left behind, roads are scorched, bridges destroyed. The enemy gives chase, thinking the battle is won, but every step forward costs them more blood, more breath, more momentum, and when they finally pause, exhausted and scattered, the counterattack comes. Emotionally, controlled withdrawal is agony. It goes against instinct. Everything screams to stay, to fight, to die for the ground under your boots. But wisdom knows that survival is not cowardice. It's the chance to strike better. The soldiers who carry out this tactic bear the weight of sacrifice. They see comrades fall while others escape. They hold the rear guard with clenched jaws, knowing the success of the retreat rests on their refusal to panic. And for the enemy, it's maddening. What felt like a win starts to crumble into confusion. They pushed forward but gained little. They claimed ground but lost men. And the haunting truth settles in. They weren't chasing the broken. They were chasing the prepared. Tactical regrouping. Tactical regrouping is the heartbeat that steadies chaos. A deliberate pause amid the storm, where scattered pieces pull back into form and shattered momentum is reforged into focus. It is not retreat. It is not surrender. It is the decision to breathe, to reset, and to reclaim control before the enemy exploits the disorder. In the thick of battle, when plans fall apart and lines begin to blur, tactical regrouping is the lifeline that prevents collapse. This tactic is rooted in discipline. It requires leadership to admit when things are unraveling and the courage to pause before it's too late. Troops are called back. Positions are reassessed. Wounded are tended to. Communications are reestablished. It's a moment of silence, carved out of the noise, not for rest, but for rebirth. To the enemy, it may look like weakness, but in truth, it's a recalibration, a gathering of strength with new purpose. The regrouping force becomes unpredictable again, reorganized, recharged, ready to strike not with panic, but precision. Psychologically, this act is powerful. It restores morale. It gives soldiers something rare in war, clarity. They see their leaders still in control. They find their comrades still alive. And in that pause, fear begins to fade. Confidence creeps back in. They are no longer reacting. They are preparing. Tactical regrouping is the moment the hunted becomes the hunter again. It is proof that even under fire, even in the face of confusion and loss, a force can rebuild itself in real time and come back sharper, meaner, and more determined than ever before. Reserve commitment. Reserve commitment is the moment the quiet becomes thunder. It is the unleashing of held-back power at the exact point when the enemy believes they've seen your full hand, only to realize too late that you were still holding the ace. In war, reserves are not just extra troops. They are hope, vengeance, salvation, or annihilation, waiting in silence for the call to transform the tide of battle. The tactic begins with restraint. While chaos unfolds on the front lines, reserves wait, often in frustration, fear, or anticipation. They hear the artillery in the distance. They see comrades wounded and ground lost, but they do not move, not yet, because reserve commitment is not about numbers. It is about timing. It's about sensing the moment when everything teeters, when one push could mean collapse or come back. And when that moment comes, the reserves don't walk. They descend. With fresh energy, unbroken lines, and a fury built from waiting, they crash into the fight like a tidal wave. To the enemy, it is devastating. They thought the worst had passed. They thought they had bled you dry. And then, suddenly, they're drowning in reinforcements that hit harder, faster, and with more purpose than anything before. Psychologically, it shatters momentum. It steals certainty. It replaces dominance with dread. And for the side committing the reserves, it rekindles fire in weary eyes. It says, "We're not done yet." It is war's second wind, explosive, defiant, and often decisive, because in battle, the one who chooses when to reveal their strength controls how the story ends. Flare used for confusion. Flare used for confusion is chaos made light, an eruption of fire in the sky meant not to illuminate, but to disorient. It is the weaponization of visibility, the distortion of sight, timing, and direction, turning the night into a flickering nightmare. This tactic doesn't kill directly. It doesn't need to. It scrambles the mind. It floods the battlefield with false clarity, then cloaks it again in sudden darkness, leaving enemies guessing, hesitating, and ultimately exposed. A flare tears through silence with a sharp hiss, then blossoms overhead in blinding brilliance. For a moment, everything is visible, too visible. Faces lit up in ghostly white, shadows thrown in every direction, every hiding place revealed, every movement spotlighted. Then, just as suddenly, it fades. Darkness crashes back, eyes sting, vision blurs, and in that confusion, attackers strike, or retreat, or reposition. The flare doesn't just light up the battlefield, it unhinges it. Emotionally, the effect is suffocating. Soldiers become paranoid, frozen under the artificial sun, unsure if they've been seen or if they're about to be. Adrenaline surges, but clarity dies. Flare after flare turns night into a stuttering, flickering theater of panic where certainty cannot survive. It plays with perception, with rhythm, with the very concept of control. And for the one who controls the flares, it is a dance of domination. They dictate what is seen and when. They blind the enemy with their own fear. Flare used for confusion isn't about light. It's about what that light takes away. Comfort, coordination, and the precious illusion of safety in the dark. Scouting parties. Scouting parties are the eyes of the battlefield, the whisper before the roar, the breath before the scream. They move ahead of the main force like phantoms, creeping through forests, crawling across ridge lines, vanishing into enemy territory with one purpose: to see without being seen. They carry no banners, make no declarations. They are not there to fight, but to know. And in war, knowledge is everything. This tactic is built on risk and restraint. Scouting parties must go where no one else dares, deep into unknown terrain, through minefields, past sniper nests, into the jaws of ambush. Every step is a gamble. Every sound could mean discovery. But if they succeed, they return with the truth, the enemy's numbers, movements, weapons, and weaknesses. That knowledge becomes the map for victory, or the alarm that prevents disaster. Emotionally, scouting is isolation in its most brutal form. These soldiers carry not just the weight of silence, but of responsibility. One mistake could doom the entire army. One missed sign could lead thousands into a trap. They must suppress fear, erase presence, and trust only their senses. And if caught, help is not coming. Scouting parties walk the line between intelligence and sacrifice, knowing full well they may never return. But for commanders, they are priceless. The early warning, the first glimpse, the gut instinct confirmed by boots in the mud. And for the enemy, they are the invisible threat, the unknown watcher who saw everything before the first shot was ever fired. Because in war, the one who sees first decides how the rest will fall. Camouflage is the art of invisibility, the mastery of becoming something you're not in order to survive, deceive, and destroy. It's not about hiding. It's about blending, transforming, and manipulating perception itself. Camouflage turns a soldier into a shadow, a tank into terrain, a sniper into a whisper of wind in the grass. It doesn't just conceal your presence, it controls how the enemy sees the world around them. This tactic preys on one of the most fragile aspects of war, the need to see clearly. If the enemy can't identify you, they can't plan for you. If they can't find you, they can't fear you until it's too late. Camouflage buys time, protects movement, and sets the stage for ambush, infiltration, and surprise attacks that feel like they materialize from the void. But it goes deeper than face paint and netting. True camouflage is psychological warfare. It makes the enemy second guess every shape, every shadow, every silence. They begin to doubt their senses. They stare at a tree and wonder if it's watching them. They walk through a clearing and feel the eyes they can't prove are there. It drains them, breaks their rhythm, makes them cautious where they should be confident. For those who use it, camouflage is not just protection, it is power. To move unseen is to move without resistance. To strike unseen is to strike without warning. And the moment you reveal yourself, it's already too late for them, because by then, the illusion has done its job, and the last thing the enemy sees is the truth, far too late to stop it. Encampment Denial. Encampment denial is war without mercy. It is not about winning the fight. It's about ensuring the enemy cannot rest. It's about stripping them of the most vital element in any campaign, recovery. When you deny your enemy the ability to establish a safe encampment, you're not just attacking their bodies, you're shattering their minds. Because without rest, without shelter, without the illusion of security, soldiers begin to rot from the inside out. This tactic targets the in-between moments, the lulls, the pauses, the desperate need for stillness. It hunts when the helmets are off and the rifles are down. You strike when tents go up, when fires are lit, when boots come off. You make every attempt to dig in feel like building on sand. Mortars fall on campfires. Drones circle sleeping hillsides. Ambushes tear through false sanctuaries. And the message spreads fast. You do not get to feel safe. Psychologically, encampment denial is devastating. Exhaustion becomes a constant state. Paranoia festers. Soldiers begin to fear stopping more than fighting. Plans fall apart. Command structures fray. Leaders can't brief, medics can't treat, and no one can think beyond the next sleepless hour. Discipline fades. Morale collapses. What's left is an army that drifts, not marches, through terrain that belongs to someone else. The brilliance of this tactic is its cruelty. You don't need to destroy your enemy, you just need to deny them peace. You become a shadow in their silence, a threat in every pause. And in time, the strongest warriors don't break from battle. They break from the unbearable truth that war, with you, never stops. Supply line disruption. Supply line disruption is the slow strangulation of an army's lifeblood, an invisible dagger to the gut, cutting not where soldiers fight, but where they survive. It is the art of severing the veins that feed the front, the ruthless tactic of turning hunger, thirst, and scarcity into weapons more devastating than bullets. Without food, there is no fight. Without ammunition, no defense. Without medicine, no recovery. Disrupt the supply line and you don't have to defeat the army. They will defeat themselves. This strategy is surgical and sadistic. It targets the vulnerable corridors between safety and war, roads, convoys, airdrops, railways. It strikes in the rear, where defense is soft and confidence high. A bridge blown, a fuel truck hijacked, a warehouse bombed, and suddenly the front line feels a slow panic rising, not from enemy fire, but from absence. Rations run low, batteries die, bandages run out, and every minute that passes becomes heavier with dread. Emotionally, supply line disruption is pure psychological warfare. Soldiers begin to feel abandoned, desperation creeps in, morale rots. They count every bullet, they ration every sip of water. It turns every decision into a gamble. Hold the line or retreat before starvation finishes what the enemy started. The battlefield doesn't shrink, it starves. And for the attacker, this tactic is control at a distance. No direct engagement, just precision chaos, just enough pressure to make the cracks widen, just enough time to watch the enemy crumble from within. Because without supplies, strength is a lie, and war, in the end, is not about who fires the last shot. It's about who has one left to fire.